time to add another verse onto the legend that is the song of Sir Waymar P. Royce. I am Matthew.
I am Lucas.
And in today's episode, we are going to cover Game of Thrones Season 1, Episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8.
And I've been watching the Inside the Episodes.
Oh, good. So let's start here. What's your broad what's your broad take on the Inside the Episodes? You know how I feel, even though I continue to watch them. What is your broad take on the Inside the Episodes?
They sound like they're experts. They talk about the characters as if they're real people. Oh, I think that blah 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 blah. And Benioff is a little bit more annoying than the other one.
I find DB Weiss really annoying.
Really, I find Weiss is the one with the glasses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I find him a little bit kind of clueless when he's talking, but it could just be the camera in front of him. Benioff, he just feels so pretentious. I'm sorry.
I just know these characters better than anyone else on this show does. I'm such an expert at writing these characters. That's my David Benioff impression.
Well done.
Thank
you. I always feel like his hands are steepled in front of him.
Right out of shot of camera.
Yeah. I know, deep in thought about these characters, like, oh yeah, and the action here, and blah 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 blah. The one I did like was when he talked to, and this isn't going to be in a later episode, which of course we'll get to. But he talked about how, Charles Dance cut open that dead stag and threw his entrails down about 50 times. That was one that I thought was pretty cool. Like, that was like the one Inside the Episode that I thought was really good. I think it's cool that they really do go inside the episode though, right? But I would prefer it if they went inside the episode on some secondary characters and not to give everything for like the main characters. Because this was your issue, is that we, the viewer, are supposed to pick up on the main characters' thoughts and emotions and everything. And the Inside the Episode's just supposed to flesh out the world. Yeah,
it's supposed to either flesh out I don't know. I feel like if they were adding a lot of content to the episode, it would be better. But like, maybe because I've watched too much like post Game of Thrones, people analyzing content. But like, I get this feeling sometimes, and I guess we'll talk about it on episode 7. I think episode 7 is the episode where they said something that I was like, you guys, do you really understand this? Or did you just get lucky? Again, you know what? I'm also being harsh because like I could never do what they did. I think they probably wrote like at least the two of them, at least 80% of the episodes. Just a rough estimate. And so obviously, like, they know their
characters. They know George R.R. Martin's characters. Okay. Ever since you brought that up, I started paying attention more to the theme song. And at the end, it says created by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. And it just, I know that this is the first season. This is sort of their opening hand. We don't know how, at least I don't know how things are going to progress in the TV show. I don't know. Are they going to hit their stride? That's where I was going with that. Is that I don't know if they're going to hit their stride. This is just the beginning, and sometimes beginnings can be a little choppy. And however, I think that we should also acknowledge how much work went into this thing.
Right. They obviously put a ton of work into it. Like, that's why it's hard, because it's like it's so easy to criticize, but it's the Robert Jordan thing. It's so easy to criticize. Put your money where your mouth is. Okay, well, I can't. And I think if I did it, I probably would have done a worse job, kind of. And we'll talk about that when we get to episode 8. But it's like, I guess my feel towards it is a little bit closer to like people who are super diehard fans of Tolkien stuff, and they see the Lord of the Rings movies, and they're like, this isn't what I read. You took some liberties with it. But,
Where's
ultimately...
Tom Bombadil?
Where's Tom Bombadil? Like, why... Like, why did you reduce the farmer maggot to, a Sith instead of, like...
a pitchfork.
Or a scythe. Yeah, a pitchfork instead of, like... Because, like, when I read Lord of the Rings, I was like, oh my god, the farmer maggot literally saved the hobbits from, like, the Nazgul at one point. And then they go into his house, and they're just, like, sitting around a coffee table talking about stuff. And I was like, this is different. I guess I'm glad he got a shout out.
Farmer maggot for the win. Bing, 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 bing.
But, like, yeah, it's easy for me to criticize, especially, like, in hindsight. It's easy for me to criticize. And especially, like, with the hindsight of other people's opinions and listening to them and their analysis of the show in comparison, because there's something on the, I don't know, I just feel like the behind the inside the episodes are just, like, really redundant. And
well,
like,
maybe they are, but they shot them.
They're really redundant, and they kind of make me worry that maybe the writers, like, as much as the writers really do know these characters, some of what they say, maybe like 10% of what they say, make me think that maybe they don't know what they're doing. And but I mean, that's kind of unfair. But it's like the inside the episode of episode 8, they don't interview George R.R. Martin, who wrote the books and wrote the episode. They interview D.B. Weiss and David Benioff, and they talk about what happened in it and the machinations and everything. So, and even then, they don't always talk about the most interesting things. I think they talk about the things, or at least HBO cuts it to be the things that they think, I guess, people will be the most interested in. So,
I mean, they could just listen to us.
Yeah, they could. Yeah, they could just listen to us 10 years, 12 years after it's been aired.
Out.
Yeah. But anyway, but I'm glad you get something out of it. I wish that I got more out of it. Except for, like, criticism. I'm such a dark person. I'm just like, ugh, they blah blah blah. Like, to be fair, even, like, when we round the corner to the stuff that isn't covered in the books, like, to be fair, they certainly went all in on like, I couldn't have done it. They carried it, they continued to carry it. So, good for them. Let's start with episode 5, which is the first episode. So written by David Benioff, D.B. Weiss, directed by Brian Kirk, his third episode in a row. And this is the first episode that David Benioff and D.B. Weiss wrote after another writer wrote an episode. So tell us about episode 5.
So Bran, I think this one opens where he wants to be an archer. And then you've got Theon and this weird whore, Roz, character not in the books. But there she is. In the Vale. So, actually...
No boobies. Lots of boobies.
Yeah.
And Theon cock. Men parts.
Indeed.
Yes.
I actually have something about the Vale that's very different in the books than happens in the movie. Or, sorry, in the show.
Yes, the Vale. Yeah.
So they go to the Vale. I thought that was really cool. I like seeing the Vale.
I did too.
Obviously, though, due to budget constraints, they made a lot of it in that one room. So, actually, I would love to get your take on this because, watching it from my perspective after reading the books, and I'll tell you a huge difference there. So I feel like they only shot 2 rooms at the Vale. The big room with the hole in the center, and then Tyrion's cell. And I feel like those were the only two actual what do they call it for films, like sets?
2 sets.
I guess. Yeah, I feel like the entire Veil was just 2 sets. But this is where I need your perspective on this. Did you feel, watching it, that it was much bigger than just those 2 sets?
Yes. I felt like the land was bigger because the establishing shot.
Like, how could they disguise that more? That's what I'm interested in your thoughts.
I mean, I think it works because, like, having her... I don't know what the different locations are in the book, but, like, the show made it look like this was, like, the main castle of the Veil. And I thought it was really cool how, like, it was all suspended over it. But I also thought that the fact that they had it in one location, like, you're introduced to Caitlyn's sister, and she's, like, on this huge throne, and she's elevated above everyone. And, like, is that how it happens in the book? Does she meet her in the throne room in the book?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the... Obviously, the throne room's a big deal, but she's sitting on a tree in the show.
Oh,
I can't remember if that's what it is in the book, but she's sitting on like a weird dead tree in the show. I love the setting.
I thought she was sitting on the throne.
It is. Yeah, the throne's
show.
It is a throne, but it's like a weird dead tree thing. It I don't know. That's what I saw.
So I like that she's in the throne room because it makes her seem a lot more imposing. And then when she gets kind of crazy, you're like, okay, like she's sitting in the throne room. Her, like, whatever, 8-year-old, or I don't know, he looked 8, is like suckling at her teat. And I was just like, okay, this is weird. Like, she's got a weird ego complex. She's got the kid has like a weird Oedipus complex. Like, there's some weird stuff going on here. And so, like, I felt like that made very effective and efficient use of showing that she's crazy-ish, a little crazy, not quite there. But I didn't. So we talk about the behind the episode. I didn't realize when I was watching the episode that the floor was supposed to be slanted slightly downwards. I remember when they said it in the behind the episode. I remember that being a thing in the book. So I guess I'm glad they had the behind the episode, but it just shows like they didn't do it right.
Is that a major point or a minor point, though?
It's a very minor point, but
still.
Well, no, I mean, like, it's kind of significant. Like, I would rather them not mention it at all, because, like, the idea of a cell with a flat floor that just exits out to death is imposing enough. But then they're like, oh yeah, and in the book it's like a slightly slanted floor, so like you really have to keep your, you really have to like use your lower body strength and do this and that. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a lot. That's like what was already there was scary, but that's a lot scarier to me.
It wasn't in this episode, but the episode where they go back to Tyrion's story, I think it was 6. I think it was the next one. They show him sleeping and they show him starting to roll. So I don't know if that is where they show that it's slanted. But I do remember
they never show it slanted. It just looked like he was rolling over because he was sleeping. Yeah, but yeah, you're right. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. So
I thought the Veil was really cool. We talked last episode about special effects being somewhat. Yes. I thought the Veil looked awesome. I was like, okay, this is awesome.
Agreed, 100%. Did we get to see like farm villages seen from afar? I feel like maybe we did. I don't know why I'm getting that image in my head. If that wasn't in the show, then they did a great job planting that in my mind.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because the Veil is huge. It is huge.
Okay.
I know we're doing a podcast, so it's hard to see on a map. But the Veil is a mountain range. It's very, very large, and there's just these beautiful, fertile lands, and they can basically hold themselves up and just ride out any war without having to get into it because they're so well defended. So in the books, this is where I find things a little bit different. The creators of the show know more than I do about it. So because as I said, I'm sort of reading without taking any spoilers. The Veil is insane. So when they first arrive, no, Sir Roderick Cassell,
No.
and Caitlin and Tyrion and Bronn and the whole group, right?
Braun.
It was not easy getting to the Vale. Their party gets picked off one by one. It's hard to get there. And once you're there, you go through the big gate. I think that was in the show. But then they immediately took Caitlin around, and dusk was falling. They're like, "Oh no, Liza wants to see you now." So this quirky little girl, well, not little, but this quirky girl, I'm assuming like mid-teens, is taking Caitlin around, and her name is Maya Stone. Stone is the last name in the Vale for children that aren't trueborn, so bastards. And this is actually one of Robert's bastards, one of his non-trueborn children. And she takes Caitlin around. And you don't really get the feel for it when you're reading it. You just know, oh, some girl named Maya Stone. But her name was mentioned before. So it really was her. That was one of Robert's children. So she takes Caitlin around. And the journey up the slopes, across these super narrow bridges, it takes like 6 hours. It takes 6 hours to get to the Erie. I call it Irie, but it's the Erie.
The Irie.
You
call it the Irie?
I do.
Okay.
We can call it the Erie, though. I'm sure they have
fine. I call her Caitlin Stark still.
It's true. And in the end, she couldn't finish it. She had to take the elevator up to the very top. But it still took like 6 to 8 hours after riding all day in the darkness to get up to the Vale. And I just remember reading that like, wow, this thing is huge. What a huge place. What an impenetrable fortress. No wonder why they feel so safe there. But the other part of me remembers what it's, one of these principles for plays, which is everything on stage matters. And, for example, if you have a shotgun over a mantle, over a fireplace in a
Chekhov's
play,
gun.
It should be used in the second act.
Right.
So that was my thought when I was reading this. I'm like, wow, the author is going into such great detail about the Eyrie and the castle and all the surroundings about it. Is this going to play a major role later on? Is our reader knowledge of this grand, wide place and how impenetrable it is that going to play a role later on in the books? So I'm currently reading Storm of Swords, and so far, well, no spoilers, sorry. But anyways, that's my thoughts, is this going to be going again? So I don't know, as the television viewer, if you caught the grand scale of the Eyrie like the reader would.
Kind of. I would say kind of. But I think they do, like, what, not quite to the scale that you're talking about, but it's, to me, it's their most gorgeous vista. So I think, like, I would say they caught at least 70% of it. If that's, because I think, like, you get an idea of the sense, but you don't understand, like, oh, how hard it actually would be to get all the way there. Personally. And
if you're thinking about it on an army invading, then you can really see how, they're going to be just fine. And they have the fertile lands. They're no need for food or water or anything.
Well, my other thing was the establishing shot that they had for it, where it's like all suspended overhead, made me think like, this is a fairly impregnable, location. So I thought that worked well. I thought the way they did it in the show was an efficient use of what they had. Like, if they really wanted to show a sense of scale, I probably would have done like a series of long, like you take a page out of Lord of the Rings, because like, you all, like, it's just the go-to, but like you have a couple of different shots of them going across the plains, and you do crossfades. So if one image fades out, the new one fades in. One image fades out, the new one fades in, and that, in your mind as you're watching it, gives you the impression that more time is elapsing than actually is going. So that would have been the only way that they could have like really expanded that, but they don't really do like show like most things think like the fade, the crossfade, the wipe, all of that is sort of taboo these days, so you don't see them very often. But that's how you would have done it.
And again, I want to just emphasize how tricky that is to be a director of this, or to be the outliner, because you've got budget constraints.
Right.
These are shots. Maybe there's CG, but still. And then you also have time constraints to tell the story. When you're the reader, you can stop reading for a second and just live in that world for just a little bit. And that's one of the challenges I think that television and movies have that obviously books don't.
Yeah. So keep going with the synopsis.
Yes. Right. Sorry. Next, we've got King's Landing. So at King's Landing, Robert jousting? Really? That big guy wanting to joust? Again, here's where things change in the books. And again, the creators or writers, they decided not to pursue this from the source material. But in the books, they try to make it more like the medieval times, or George R.R. Martin wanted to be very like medieval times. So in medieval times, the tournament includes jousting, archery, and a melee. And actually, Robert didn't want to joust at all. He's probably not a very good jouster. Probably even back in his prime, he wasn't a good jouster. But he was probably really good at the melee, which is like 40 knights with blunt edges just going to town at each other. Last one standing wins. And so in the books, Robert wanted to join the melee. Ned talks him out of it. Very similar dialogue, except instead of jousting, right? It's for the melee. But in the books, it's also sort of hinted at and then confirmed by Varys later on that the melee was going to be an attempt on Robert's life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. By the Queen. How do we know this? Because the Queen said, "Oh, don't compete, Robert. Don't get in there. You're too old to. You're gonna die." And
she goads him into it.
No way, woman. Yes, she goads him into it. She uses the oldest trick in the book, reverse psychology, to get him to do it. And Ned was the one that talked him out of it. It was a plot on his life, and it got, thank goodness for that, I suppose. But in that moment, Ned looks at Robert, and he's like, in the books, "We can rule this thing. We can be great. We can rule the 7 kingdoms.
Ned says
prosperity." This? Yeah, he thinks it. He's like, "I just see it all. We get the Lannisters out of the way, and we're going to make an incredible kingdom. Robert and I, we can do it." All of a sudden, he sees the future. He has these huge, grand plans. That was in the books. Again, that's what Neddard Stark was thinking. So, of course, in the show, you don't really know what they're thinking.
Yeah. So on that note, the thing is, like, they could easily have a scene. Granted, they only have a certain amount of time, and you have to pick and choose your battles. But like, if you were going to represent that in the show, you could have a scene of him like walking in his room, and like one of his trusted advisors, say someone who's going to be killed off really soon, walks in, and Neddard is just like unloads on him. And then you could have been like, okay, well, there we go. We have what he was thinking in there. Instead, a lot of the time, I feel like what Ned is thinking is like, I can't believe I have to babysit this giant freaking baby. But
oh, the king.
No, Bill Mueller is awesome in the show.
I love Bill Mueller.
I love Mark Addy. He's so good. He played it. For those listening who don't know what Bill Miller is, he played a show called Still Standing. It was a multicam sitcom, and he played the father who was like, like this former. He basically like a nicer version of Robert Baratheon who doesn't beat his kids and wife. But anyway,
last 2 things on the tournament.
Yes,
Sandor Clegane wins because the Knight of the Flowers, Sir Loras, He was fighting Gregor Clegane, the one that scares me a lot.
Right.
And it was explained later the horse was in heat. And so did Sir Loris win a little underhanded? Maybe. But the head of the horse got chopped off for you Godfather fans out there. There you go. That's how they did it back then, too. And so Sandor wins. But what happens is that Gregor comes down and he starts fighting with his sword. And Sandor steps in to face off against his brother. And that's pretty epic. Okay, let me tell you about how it went in the books, and then you let me know if Mark Addy pulled it off. So in the books, Robert Baratheon, he uses his battlefield commander voice to make them stop. For an instant there, Robert Baratheon is back to being the incredible soldier he is, and his voice just booms out, his battlefield commander voice, and that's when everybody's like, whoa, yeah, this guy's king. That was his commanding voice. So I had a little perspective on that. I don't know if that got through though. If Mark Addy pulled it off,
I don't think it did. It's been a while since I've watched the episode now. I don't think it did. I thought it was just more of like the king being like, "Stop this nonsense. I need more whiskey." You know, like I don't think it was like. I'm trying to think of the scene because I think if I were gonna do it, I would have probably like. One, I don't know if it's in the script because that would be important stage direction to have so that you would know to get the shot of like and you might remember better than I do. But like I would have had Baratheon like stand up, but not just stand up straight. He would actually have to have his shoulders slightly tilted like he was giving commands and orders. And instead of just commanding them and sort of like, all right, stop this madness, maybe like, I don't know. I don't remember if he like raised a hand to it. Like I almost want to go back and rewatch just that section. I won't, but just rewatch that section to see like make it do more things to make it seem like he's giving a command. If I remember correctly, it was kind of just shot flat instead of like maybe have him like forced forward more than everyone else to make it look like the people who are sitting next to him look like when the president gives the State of the Union, and you have the leader of the House of Representatives and the vice president, right, behind him or whatever. Give it more of like a military look to it in the composition of the shot, and that can get across like he looks kingly again. Put something in there visually to make him look like a king or a commander. That's how you get that across. But again, you have to pick your battles. So that would have been nice. But that's what the director should be adding. If it's not in the script, and if it needs to be something that's visually told, that's what the director needs to take care of.
It's a big book. I don't know if the director read it. It would be nice. I've actually got I got more to say about King Robert, which I think we can get to later on. Right. It was also revealed that Sir Hugh was John Arryn's killer. John Arryn's killer. Sorry.
Right. That's right.
No, Sir Hugh.
No, sir, I don't know who this is. He died immediately after being introduced.
Right, he's the killer. Let's see. Let me just briefly go through the last few bullet points I've got. Arya and the Red Keep.
Chasing cats.
Chasing cats, yeah. And overhearing a very interesting conversation because nobody remembers Illyrio. He was the guy that sent Daenerys off at the very beginning of the show.
Yes, I remember him.
And Varys was the other one. So I would love to keep talking about the Red Keep if we can hold that one. And then you have the scene with Renly and Loras. That wasn't in the books, and it was very barely hinted at. So props to... This is one where I give a lot of props to the show for exploring that. Another scene that wasn't in there was the Robert and Cersei scene where they talked to each other for a while. Of course, that wasn't in the books, but that is also in addition to the point I wanted to bring up about Robert that I think we should do in a later episode.
probably the next episode.
And before we get to the closing shot, I want to talk a little bit about Arya and the Red Keep before the closing scene.
What was the closing? Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and talk about Arya and the Red Keep.
In the books, Arya is chasing this black tomcat with like a chopped off ear, and that was one of the Targaryen princess's cats, and it's the meanest, cleverest cat ever, and it sort of lives in the Red Keep, and nobody can catch it because it's just that awesome of a cat. And this is where I'd like to talk about the Red Keep and just how incredible it is. This might be like a little point of dialogue later on, I'm not sure. But everybody who built the Red Keep died. The king who had that thing constructed created tons of secret passageways, hidden routes, little switches, things like this. And he killed all of his architects and builders because he didn't want anybody else to know about them.
Okay.
So he
Which
wanted
king was
all that
it?
to be- Aegon. I don't know. But the first one, the one that built the Red Keep.
Okay.
1,000 years ago, I guess. It's probably like 1,000 years ago when that happened.
Okay.
But originally the throne room was decorated with the dragons. So, of course, in my mind, when I was reading it, you had this tiny little girl looking up to this huge dragon, and I just imagined the lighting shines behind her at this huge skeleton of a dragon. But I thought that was really cool. So when Robert became king, he took out all those dragons and he put tapestries in there because I'm sure there are many reasons why you wouldn't want dragons in there.
My only comment on that is because let's see, we talked about Cersei and Robert B, and still not much Sansa, but a lot of Arya.
Not that much.
That was what?
Not that much. She had that scene, and then she had the scene where she told Ned, and I think that was it.
But that's still like, I mean, they still devote a lot of time to her. Granted, that makes sense. She's a major point of view character in the books, as I'm sure you're aware so far, right? Because she's in the first one. Is she in the second and third? Is she a POV character in the second and third?
She is.
Okay.
I didn't know if you wanted that revealed. Actually, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Robert Cersei dialogue and the acting of it.
Oh, I thought that scene was awesome.
Me too.
I don't like. I remember that was. So when you were watching it the first time, that was where I actually have a note in here. The non-POV character scenes are doing a lot of work, especially in this episode. Like, I don't think this is the first episode where they have a lot of non-POV character scenes, but up until this point, I think it's the one episode that has the most non-POV characters scenes. Because I think it seems like it just goes from like one scene to another. Like we have the Theon scene. Like we go all the way to Winterfell, and we don't cover any of the characters who are in Winterfell, which at this point is just Bran. So
Start Kid Roundup. Roundup.
For some reason, I thought of SpongeBob, not Encanto. No, Encanto.
Jon Snow. Nowhere to be found.
Nowhere to be found. Nope.
Rob. No.
Nope.
Arya, yeah.
Yeah.
I call her Sansa, but it's apparently Sansa. No.
No. Sansa beans. No, like Senzu beans.
She might have had like one scene with no Septum Ordain. If you wanted to know the name of that woman.
I did. I did. But the Robert B scene with Cersei, I think, is really good because that's like one of the ones where they reveal that she was like she reveals that she did love him at one time. Yes. Now there's a part that happens later on, but she reveals that she loves him in that scene. I feel like there was a lot that happened in that scene because that was a long scene.
It's really good.
I also liked the scene between Middlefinger and the spider, where they basically.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Forgot about that one.
I kind of liked it. I feel like that's gonna be me for a lot of the things. Where it's like, I think in theory it's a great scene, and like I think the way that it's written is pretty clever, and it's nice because the actors get to act. But it was also one of those things where it's like in the book, I guess it's a good scene because it makes verbal to the audience what is implied in the book. Mm-hmm. You know, in the book, George can tell it. No, I'm on a first name basis. Martin can tell us what these characters are and their backstory and their histories without anyone saying it. You know, Neddard can just think it. However, in the show, they have to find another device, another way of incorporating it. And so I know that's one of the things I complained about. And so that's why this scene is good in the show. And again, you get to let your character actors act, which is good. So that's why I'm torn, because like I liked the scene. I liked watching the scene. And obviously the writers enjoyed writing the scene. But it was basically just like, yeah, I don't know. I don't like, I don't know. I'm torn. But yeah, generally speaking, I liked it. I liked it a lot.
It's always tricky when actors put their own spins on characters, because they're supposed to. They're supposed to be acting the character, right? And for the reader, what if it's a little bit different than what you? I don't know. I got nothing.
I think the casting for Varys is pretty good. Then again, like in general, it's like heavy-set man, bald. So it's like, okay. It's hard to go wrong there. I think the casting for Middlefinger is pretty good. I think I was expecting someone a bit more greasy looking, but I like who they cast. Even though like this is a problem with the direction of the show, where like they'll hold on Middlefinger's face, and it's like you couldn't communicate to the audience anymore that maybe this guy is not so good. Like, and we'll get into that in episode 7. I think we get into that in a little bit more detail.
Final scene.
Yes. So you talk about the final scene, and then I'll tell you my thoughts on it.
Okay. I will tell you. I'll tell you everything I think, felt, liked about it or didn't like about it.
Yeah.
Books. He comes out with his people. They die. Jamie says, yeah, don't kill Neddard.
Right.
And they're all on horseback. And so then they all start attacking, and Ned goes to help and save one of his people, and his horse falls on him. And that's how he injures his leg in the books. And I've got to say, I actually liked the direction that they took in the show, where they actually had Ned and Jamie kind of face off there, mano a mano, for a little bit until, his leg was wounded by a spear.
Right.
So crushing wound versus, getting speared in there. And I thought that for a TV show, for a more dramatic experience, these characters, right? I thought that it was a good change from the books. And there's one more like that too, actually, that I noticed a little bit later.
In the episode or in the...
In a future episode.
Okay. So I'm glad you said that, because I didn't know, I didn't remember how that happened in the books. I do like that they took that in the show. I think it's like, so I know that on Under the Wheels, Gabe and I talk a lot about how we have like a love-hate with fan service, but I think that's one of those fan service moments where it's like, ooh, like I have always wanted to see Neddard and Jaime fight. But
and the television viewer is just like on their edge of their seat, because they know people die, and one of these two fighters is
gonna die
in this fight, and you don't know. You're watching like, oh my gosh, is this really happening? And it is really, yeah. So I loved it.
It's also
great.
Did you watch the behind? Because this is the thing I remember distinctly on this. The behind the episode, or the inside the episode, And he's like, yeah, and Jamie is like, all right, I'm gonna finally get to test my sword play against Neddard, which they set up in an earlier episode. So it's kind of like the fruition. It's like, okay, here's the payoff we wanted.
Yeah,
and so they start fighting. And then, Jamie's like, oh no, or the writer Benioff is talking about how like, and then he realizes like, Neddard is here and he's like, he's here to kill. Like, oh no, now, and then the fighting gets more graphic, and I'm like, okay, that's really, yeah, like I got that. I didn't need it spelled out, but I appreciate that you told us that. My problem with it is that the fight choreography is awful.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like that's it. Like you can I understand where all of their money goes, because and they even made a comment about it. It's like, oh yeah, and people are gonna show up because they want to see like the battles, like the violent battles, but really the thing that will keep is like there's the battle of the minds that are going on underneath. And I'm like, dude, like you might think people are showing up for the fights, but like this choreography, I feel bad because there's probably a lot of it in there, but like they did not look like swordsmen.
Yeah, well, they are actors, and I don't think they had the time and the effort as Wesley, aka Dread Private Robertson, no, Indigo Montoya did.
Yeah, that's where like the TV-ishness of it holds through, because like and again, it happens a lot in Hollywood movie. Like there's actually a good number of Hollywood movies that they rely on the actor's prior experience doing fight scenes or action scenes or hand-to-hand combat. And they talk a lot about like the way that you have to shoot it, and you have to shoot efficiently, which I'm not going to really bore people with here. But in a TV show, you have to shoot it even more efficiently. I'm sure that will change as things go forward. But in like initially, especially when it's like a new show, they don't know how it's going to do. They're going to put a lot of money into it, and they're filming all around the world. They're like, look, we got to make our days. We got to get our footage. So I'm going to teach you this. I'm going to teach you this combo, and we're going to shoot it, and we're going to try and get it from as many angles so we can cut around it. But unfortunately, it still looks really bad. Although Jamie's sword looks awesome.
And not every actor is Keanu Reeves, who can do this stuff, right?
Yeah, but Sean Bean was Boromir. Like, he took down like 80 orcs, all right? He was awesome. Again, I don't blame the actors on this one. I don't even blame the choreographer. I blame the schedule.
And like, Jamie Lannister was in Shrek 2.
He was in Shrek 2. No, he didn't do any sword fighting in Shrek 2. But
that's true.
But yeah,
you can't rely on that experience.
Yeah, I don't blame the actors at all for that fight. It's just schedule. It just looks awful.
I think that we can revisit the fight scenes a little bit later too. There's one in particular I think is I was watching it just going, oh boy.
Like you were excited?
Yeah. It was more Jason Bourne and
is it the next
Batman
episode?
Begins. Then it was no, it was episode.
Was it episode 8?
I believe it was when Serial Pharrell has to defend himself.
Ah, yes, episode 8. Okay, we'll get to that.
Yes.
Are we ready to move on to episode 6, the episode that we don't have any notes on, but is actually
Let's do it.
It was actually one of the writers for Gilmore Girls actually wrote an episode, Jane Espenson.
No way.
Is her name? And Jane Espenson, and she has written her list of credits is insane. She wrote on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Battlestar Galactica, Torchwood, Once Upon a Time, Game of Thrones, Jessica Jones. She's very successful. I don't know if I mean she's very prolific. She's been writing since 1994. And at one time, she said that writing A Golden Crown was one of the easiest episodes of television she ever wrote. So, let's get into it.
It was pretty close to the books, very parallel to it. I didn't see too much difference. But I believe this is the second episode when Jon Snow is nowhere to be seen. So he's not in 2 episodes. in a row.
Let's see.
We've got King's Landing, and I believe. Oh, yes. Right. One thing that we did not do about last episode was that the fat king showed up to the council meeting and said, "Kill the kids," and Ned's like, "No."
Yeah, no, we didn't talk about that. We do need to. You're right.
Right. And then in this episode, Rob's like, "We got to get out," or not Rob. I'm sorry. Neddard's like, "We got to get all the kids out," and of course Sansa's like, "But Joffrey, I love him." Well, he gets reinstated because that's when Ned learns that Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides, is being a raider and he's attacking villages. And in the books, it's pretty graphic. The descriptions, like he just goes and kills people, hangs their dead bodies, and just it's not good. And then they burn everything. And then he orders, "No, Beric Dondarrion! No, Beric Dondarrion!" She's like, he's probably a throwaway character. I don't know. But I just love the name. Dondarrion. No, Beric Dondarrion!
No! Sir Beric Dondarrion.
I know. Guys, I don't know. Just like an epic name, right? Quick, go after him. And also in King's Landing, Robert's like, "I'm going to a hunting trip, and Starks and Lannisters can't be at war, so your hand again." And then at the end, that's where Ned has that insight about Joffrey, and so he knows that Robert's got children with a lot of other women. But this was one time where he realizes that Joffrey and company, Myrcella and Tommen, aren't Robert's children. And that was a big reveal.
Yes.
In the Vale. Ooh, in the Vale. Oh, maybe we should start talking about combat here. In the Vale, This is the Bronn versus the... I forgot the guy's name. Because he dies.
Lysa's champion. Oh, they don't say it.
Yes. Yeah. They do in the books in great detail.
Why is it considered okay? But anyway, yeah. So Tyrion. No, well, so we'll go back to King's Landing in a second. But so Tyrion is trying to bribe the guard, and then he says, "All I want you to do,
Lord!
I want you to do is to tell the queen, no, Lysa, no Hamilton fans out there, that that I want to seek my own defense." And that's when he goes in front and he's like, "This is where you get to see Tyrion be Tyrion." And it's awesome because he's like, "Okay, well, I say trial by combat. Oh, okay, you can fight. But I get a champion. Okay, fine, you get a champion. Who's your champion? It's gonna be my brother Jaime." They're like, no. Like, fine.
And they're like, no.
Fine then. Will anyone here be my champion? And he's like, I know someone wants to. I know someone's fed up with all of this BS. And Bronn's like, why not? And so he gets why notted into the situation.
My Bronn has long black hair, clean shaven. His hair is shoulder length. Long, tall, wiry fellow.
Well, so talk about Bronn for a little bit. Like, what do we know about Bronn so far? Because in the show, it's like she goes into the whorehouse and like she finds Tyrion there, and Caitlyn's talking to all of these people and like they're all loyal to me, and then like they capture him.
Oh, it's an inn.
Sorry, the inn. I'm sorry. But what is Bronn's story? Because like they don't really go into it at all in the episodes that he's been in so far.
I don't know Bronn's.
He's just there.
Story. He's just there.
And he just starts hanging out with Tyrion.
And he's a very good swordsman. He sharpens his blade all the time, and it's very calming. You know, eventually later on, after they travel for a while, it's like a calming, soothing sound, the sound of him. And every night, Bronn sharpens that sword.
Okay.
It's just razor sharp every night.
All right.
And
I think they tease that.
Very meticulous. They do.
Yeah.
As they're traveling, they show him sitting down, sharpening the sword, but he's very meticulous. I feel like he is a probably George R. R. Martin's samurai Ronin.
Okay.
Just kind of showing up and being a jack of all trades, an extremely useful person. And what's his story? And just like the Ronin with no name. At least we know Braun's name.
That's so cool.
That's my take on Braun. Yeah, everybody likes Braun. Everybody. I don't know people who don't like Braun. He's very, very interesting.
Okay.
So that's Braun's story. I don't know.
All right. So then Braun fights and Liza. So the champion that Liza chooses, is that like because in the show there's like subtle implications that like they're like, oh, aren't you loyal to your king and your queen? Don't you want to fight for your queen? And like the way that the camera kind of lingers and the way that they're looking, it's almost like maybe there's a little bit of something going on under the table between the two of them in a sort of romantic sort of way. I don't know if you got that from the show.
I did not.
Okay. All right. Maybe I'm reading too much
didn't
into
get
it.
that.
Maybe I'm reading too much into like the dialogue and the way that they say things then.
Yeah. But speaking of fight choreography, this is where I was asking you about different locations and how big the veil is, or the Eyrie, or the Erie. Mm-hmm. In the books, it's not in that room. Their fight is in a religious grounds, like the gods would, right? That's where you go to pray. That's where the fight was going to take place.
Okay.
So that's probably why I think about it. But again, budgetary concerns, because that's a beautiful set, versus, storytelling things. I thought it worked either way. But I swear, I don't know, maybe because it's 2022 and I expect a lot more from my fight scenes about it. Seeing a far shot, watching them actually do things, and you could have stunt people do this. One of them is in complete armor and very slow, and the other one, you just put his back to the camera, dodging and dipping and swerving and just, getting in there. And it wasn't when Liza's champion died, it wasn't like a good thing. The Veil was really upset. They were really upset. They're like, oh my God, this guy's a really good knight, and we don't have him anymore. And and it was pretty impactful. And everybody's just like, oh. So Liza's like, okay, or Liza is like, just go, get out of here, and you get none of my folk to help you on your way. It's just you and Braun. That's it. Like, go, get out.
Right.
And you're probably gonna die by and Tyrion was like, this is kind of a death sentence still. Like, this isn't.
Yeah. Well, it's even more. So okay. So like, I want to unpack this a little bit more.
Sure.
So the one thing is, like, I agree with you on the fight scene. Again, I think it's just because it was early in the show's run that they were like, okay, we're cut for time. Also, there's a certain immediacy that having them fight right there has, where it's like, okay, the tension is building and they want an immediate result. So I think like that's a way that narratively in a shortcut, like that's something you might have to do in film, where it's like, we can't jump to this other location. Let's just keep it here. We'll keep it fast and we'll keep it moving. I like Tyrion's swagger as he exits, but also I like the idea that, like, in the book, one thing that happens is, because of the structure of the book, you'll have something told from one person's point of view, and sometimes you kind of wish it was told from someone else's point of view, so you knew what they were thinking. What's nice about the show, and you probably won't hear it often from me, but I'm praising the show, but like, it was kind of nice to see them able to work out, like, you got the point of view for both of them at the same time, because you have two point of view characters in there. You have Catelyn and Tyrion in there. You have both of the point of view characters going at it at the same time, and I thought that was a really nice touch as well. And like I said, I love his swag. He gets his gold back and he just immediately flips it to the prison guard. Like, ooh, okay.
No, Lord.
So
no, Lord.
I did appreciate that. Also, like, people say the show is like really violent, and maybe it gets even more violent. But like, to me, a lot of the violence in the show, like, it still looks pretty fake. Like when he stabs the sword, I don't know. Like, it could be more, some of the stuff that happens could be more graphic, and maybe it will get more graphic as it goes. But like, I think there's a way you could do it where like Bronn stabbing his sword down into the neck piece of the knight, or through the helmet. Like, I think there's a way you could do it where the implication of it is a lot more like, oh my god. But the fact that like it's kind of rough, like it's kind of like a jitter cut, like he stabs it and then it cuts to, and you see the blood flow, and then like it cuts to, then it's like, ah, and the blood flies out and stuff. Like, I'm like, okay.
I like that blood just flowing over the armor like that. I thought that was really artistic touch.
Yeah, I mean, it is artistic and it's nice. I'm just saying, like, I remember people giving me like horror stories about how violent it is, and like maybe it's just because I've seen, you know, Ridley Scott's movies, but like I've seen that before. They do something like that in Kingdom of Heaven, and it's super brutal. So maybe I'm coming at it from, and like I said, maybe the show gets a lot more like, much more, you know, devilish in its combat and its fighting. But I remember I was like, a lot of the stuff that I saw, even a very specific wound that happens later on in next episode, I think, I was looking at it and I was like, that doesn't look that bad. Like that doesn't look that gross. You could have made it look worse. So
I kind of wonder if they're saving that for like other characters that have names that we remember besides Bronn. You know, like don't throw out the. You have to pick and choose your moments too. Yeah, it's always
well, I
tricky.
just like, for a show that's known for its like brutally. I don't know. Maybe like, I think it's also just me and like what I've heard of the show, and people's impressions. Like I feel like it's
gotta ramp it up, huh?
Like, yeah, well, like we've both seen The Last Duel. The Last
Yes.
Duel has violence that makes me squirm. You know?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, anytime I see leg shots like that, I'm like, oh god.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think you should use your sword to put it in the ground and then literally shove a guy's head through it. That doesn't seem nice.
No, that was
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. Anyway, but we
got a tense scene in this episode too. Oh,
What?
sorry. Go ahead, finish.
No, go ahead.
We got a tense scene in Winterfell. Oh gosh, a huge point. I'm so sorry. Before I wanted to jump, huge point was that Caitlyn was second guessing herself.
Yeah.
That was a major point in the book, and she's like, this, you know, and it had happened before, but she started second guessing, like, I don't know if this is right. Like, what if he really didn't do this and he's just gonna die? You know, and Tyrion is quite the underdog, and here we got two heavy hitters, Caitlyn versus Tyrion. This is a heavy hitting kind of thing, and you know, from where I am reading the books, it's like, wow, this is, they're going head to head right now. That's like, wow, Caitlyn versus Tyrion. But yeah, Caitlyn was a little bit like, I don't know. But
Maybe you get that from I always forget her name, from the actress who plays as Caitlyn. Like, she does a great, oh my god, I can't
like uncertain.
Yeah,
the actress's name.
Yeah, the actress's name. I got that feeling from her. Michelle Fairley.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Michelle Fairley. Like, I got that feeling of like, maybe she's believing Tyrion. And I think something you said on the last episode, like, oh, I always bet on my brother. And then I think he even says some stuff in that episode where he's like, you're right, why would I use my own knife? Like, yeah, you're right. If I were going to kill him, I'd use my own knife, obviously. Like,
right, yeah.
Right. You know what? You know what, Tyrion? Do it. Yeah, do that. Say the things like that. Be the sort of like the schemer character, which is nice in the books because you hear a lot about scheming characters. You know, Varys and Middlefinger and Cersei to an extent. But like, it's nice to have one character that we get the point of view from, who is a scheming character, who is at least a little bit decent at it. It seems like there's a lot more failures he goes through. If I remember correctly in the book, I feel like he went through a couple of failures where it's like, are you a schemer? But
you got me with that reference.
No.
Oh, that was great.
But anyway, Did you want to keep going on the Veil, or should we move on to back to?
We got Winterfell. I can briefly go through what I felt was like actually a very scary scene.
Yeah, go ahead and do Winterfell. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on this.
Bran was on his horse riding around, and then he outrode his knights and his security detail. Yep. You need new security, Bran. He outran his security detail, and all of a sudden some wildlings came by, and he got totally ambushed. So Robb comes by on his horse, and I mean, these are like princes of Winterfell, right? And these bandits are coming after him, and they did. The line of succession for these rulers is in mortal danger right now. This is kind of scary. And, one of them fights super dirty and gets Bran with a knife to his throat and just keeps it there. And then Theon, man, he's a very good archer, but that...
risky.
I mean, in the show, you already saw Bran fall down and be completely paralyzed from the waist down. How much more can one poor boy go through? Now he's getting... So, at this point, I feel like the viewer's like, hey, these characters, bad things can happen to them. And Theon took a risk. It's not like in TV where the main character's in this mortal danger and then you're like, well, we know he's going to get out of it because he's going to be there next week. With Game of Thrones, you don't know. And yeah. I think that's a good... When I was reading it, of course, I was like, oh my gosh. That's kind of the mark of the show, right? Is that you just don't know. Every episode, so much happens in every episode. And yet somehow I feel that not a lot happens in each episode.
Yeah.
You get that feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was all I had for Winterfell.
So, just like quickly on Winterfell, we didn't really talk about Theon. We don't talk about Theon.
No, we don't.
I think like they did kind of. I remember in the sex scene from the prior episode, they kind of outline his storyline and like, oh well, you're just a squire. You're just a ward of Winterfell because your family, they tried to revolt and your father's dead and your brothers are dead or whatever and now you serve House Stark. How does it feel? And so they kind of bring that back in where he's like, yeah, but I shot him and I hit him. It's like, yeah, but what if you didn't? What if you missed? And he's like, yeah, but I didn't. It's like, remember who your lords are. You're not our lord. Even though it's like they're kind of friendly, they're also like constantly remind Theon like you're less than us. Remember that. So the show.
What if the Raiders made that? What if the Raiders made that 4th down and goal from the 9-yard line? Right?
Yeah, but
they didn't.
They didn't. Right? What if they did? But they didn't. So
exactly.
That's the other thing about that. Oh, and the fact that the people. It seemed like the people who were there, the people who captured Bronn. No, not Bronn. I mean Bran. No, why do they have the same name?
No, they're the same name but different vowel.
The people that captured him.
One less N.
No, one less N. They seem to have come from beyond the wall. So I thought that was interesting.
Yes, they were.
That was something that was kind of teased. So I thought that was interesting.
And I think one of the best lines was... Oh, wait, no. That happens later.
That happens probably in episode 8. No, when we see another...
Episode 8, yeah.
Wait, did we see a penis in this episode?
Hodor! No, that's not.
No, that's in episode 8.
I believe so.
There was
last one on here was a Daenerys scene.
You're right. Yes.
She has to eat the big heart of the stallion, and
that was so gross.
Anyone who's gone through pregnancy or is currently going through pregnancy, I don't know how realistic that scene is, but it's one of those, like, a main character's got to have 3 things, I've heard. They got to have grit, they got to have wit, and they got to have it, right? And it is that intangible that can't really be quantified or described very well, or defined. But this is where, like, Daenerys shows her grit, and she shows she is a character of will. And that was just awesome. I mean, impossible scenario, and she does it. And then at the end, of course, the name of the episode is A Golden Crown. And so we, of course, can't forget to talk about that. And this is where I think Jason Momoa gets to act. For like the first time all series, he just gives that surly look that he does. But this time, he actually, like, acts.
So let's also add, like, Viserys. No, I think we
no
have
Viserys.
No Viserys. No creepy brother had a like, he's been slowly getting more and more discouraged, and like he sees her eat the heart, and he's like, oh well, the people love her. Like Khal Drogo will never give me gold. Khal Drogo will never, do this for me. So he goes to steal the eggs, and Jorah Mormont stands in his way. I remember when I read the first book, I was like, the only thing I like about Daenerys chapters is Jorah Mormont. Otherwise, they are miserable. At least the first, like, 3 or 4 are miserable, except for Jorah Mormont. And so that's when, like, they make it pretty explicit. So one, Viserys has his sword out. 2, he's stealing the dragon eggs, which he believes are rightfully his. Even though they show earlier in the episode how the dragon eggs are on fire and Daenerys grabs it. I think you alluded to this. Daenerys grabs it and then, like, her hands are fine. But then her hot maid grabs it and she gets burned.
No, Doria.
I don't know if that was actually her in this episode, but... Oh, yeah, it was. Okay. So then Viserys goes to steal them, and then he's confronted by Jorah Mormont, which we don't really know much about. We know that he's a traitor.
A slaver trader. And we find out more about that in the next episode. But he stops him, and he's like, put those eggs down. And Viserys is like, blah, 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 blah. Like, I'll use this to fund my army, and I will get the Iron Throne, because I deserve the Iron Throne. It is mine by birthright, which we'll also talk about later on in the next episode. In the next episode,
there's a lot of interesting things about character motivations that I want to talk about. But, Jorah stops him, and Viserys is like, obey your king. Aren't you obeying your king? And he's like, I will, but you got to give those eggs back. And now we get the sense that Jorah knows who he's pushed all of his money into.
Where his loyalties lie. All in.
Loyalties, and as Viserys hints at, and I don't know if this is in the book, but Viserys strongly hints that, like, Jorah might have a thing for her, which is even creepier because he's an old guy. Like, in the books, he's, like, a pretty old guy, right?
Not as old as the show.
Not that old? Okay. And she's, like, 14, but it's like, okay.
That's a good point.
So Viserys
doesn't matter if he's like 40 versus 14 or 30 versus 14.
Yeah,
there's not much of a difference there.
Yeah, and of course the age scale in the show is like way off, because like if he's like a badass knight, if he's a badass knight at 30, I'm like, okay, well I'm 30, so like that makes a difference to me. But in the show, he looks like he's 50. So
yeah, but these are knights at 16, 17.
That's true.
He has some city miles on him.
That's true. But and then we get to the scene. We then after that he puts back the egg. Viserys puts back the eggs, and then he goes in all drunk, and he's asking Khal Drogo for his money.
He takes that sword and points it right at the womb of Daenerys.
Yes.
And in the books, at that moment, that precise moment, I remember, she refers to him as the man who used to be my brother. Or the man who is no longer my brother. Yeah. That's one thing that about the books and his writing style is very interesting, is that he gives titles and things like that. Gives characters names and then and in the writing, like you said, the Daenerys chapters, I would stop at those chapters because but Dany didn't think it was like that. That's how I felt every time I read a Daenerys chapter. I'm like, oh gosh, this doesn't know anything like it. But he said this, but Dany wasn't so sure. Oh my god. Anyways, But yeah, so she did say like, yeah, man who's no longer my brother, and she didn't mind that. Well, he got the crown he wanted, and Jason Momoa got to act. Finally.
Yeah, and that was awesome. He takes the thing that that Viserys had used to hit Daenerys with. Khal Drogo throws it in the pot. It melts instantly because, TV. We gotta cut time here, so we can't watch it melt.
Right.
And then he grabs it and he pours it on Viserys, and thus passes Viserys, son of Aemon.
I don't have the appendices in front of me.
And you just hear it, probably could have been a bit more graphic. Probably could have been a bit more gruesome. But I
thought that was fine.
I love the part where he falls to the ground and you just hear a giant metallic thud. And they cut to Emilia Clarke. They cut to adorable Emilia Clarke, and she just has this look of passive, oh, this jerk. Let me just watch him as he passes into the shadow, and just the complete, it's you don't want to see this, and she has that feeling of yes, I do. And I don't feel any mercy for him. He was not the dragon, clearly.
No, he wasn't.
Because if he were the dragon, he would have survived it.
The dragon doesn't get burned by fire. Yeah, actually, probably. That was alluded to earlier, which you grabbed, like you said, she
grabs the flaming
dragon eggs,
and as you know from the end of that first book, right?
That's right, as we do know.
So I think he was no dragon. Fire cannot kill a dragon. So even though it's metallic fire, as we know from watching The Desolation of Smaug, hot gold will not kill. So do you have more to comment on in Vaes Dothrak?
Just that only about the inside the episode. Oh, I guess about Vaes Dothrak would be, you thought that Viserys was going to be a major character. You thought that maybe he was going to get this army. Maybe this was, Westeros is doing their thing, but maybe Viserys was the big bad Shadow Lord from across the land, going to come with a horde of Dothraki ready to retake his land, and even though now it's somehow better than it was before, and he could somehow make it even better. And then you're like, wait, this is no Shadow Lord. This is, and there you go again. Characters can die. They can die. You might think that he would be a major player later on, and then he's not. And that's interesting, right? That's what the show's made for. So anytime you say anything about Game of Thrones, right? People say, "Oh yeah, they all die." There you go. And you wonder, how did it get that reputation?
So we came from the books. Do you feel like the actor they got to play Viserys was intimidating enough to make you think that he was going to be the big bad in the show? When I read the book, no. I thought he was going to stay around for a while. When I watched the show, because I was already a decent way into the book, I did not think that. Maybe that's why. I'm wondering if the book is prejudicing me against the actor's performance. But I found him more intimidating initially in the book than I did in the show.
I did too, but I felt that he was more of a bully in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in the show, this is going to sound kind of weird, but in the book, you're going from Daenerys' point of view.
Right.
But in the show, they're just showing the truth.
Well, okay. I mean, that's... Okay. That's not... That's... The idea that the camera is an objective perspective is misleading. Because... think about how you can see an actor... how you can see an actor in a role where they're gentle versus versus a role when they're a brutal murderer. Just look at The Rock, for example. You can see him in the, what is it? He's not in The Tooth Fairy, but
Scorpion King.
Well, I mean, Scorpion King's another not amazing example, but look at Tom Hardy, right? You can see Tom Hardy as the charming guy Eames from Inception. You can see him as Bane. You can see him as Eddie Brock. You know, like like his character shifts, but also the way we frame them shifts. And like I was gonna be bad and say like, if you look at the way that the camera shoots women, or the fact that violent scenes can take on different contexts. You can have goofy graphic violence, you can have brutal violence, and you can have violence that happens that you don't see but is manipulated in your mind. So there is a way that you can shoot Viserys to represent Sinister Man and gradually turn him into Pathetic Man. But part of that is going to be handicapped by some of the choices you make, either in casting or this or that. You know, like you can make someone look like a mountain of a man and make them look like the smallest person ever in the same scene. So that's what I mean by like, that's what I like from Daenerys' point of view. Yes, you are 100% correct. Like from Daenerys' point of view in the books, I remember him getting less and less dangerous as time expired or as the book went on. You could have done that in the show as well, but I think they wanted to shorthand it a little bit. Also, I wonder if D.B. Weiss and David Benioff had the same feeling of like the Daenerys stuff is really good, but her chapters are really hard to read. Like not even like boring or a slog. They're just very, especially in the beginning, it's like, this is just really sad stuff. This is really hard. I don't want to read it because I don't want to see how much worse it gets.
Yeah, the brother and sister on the run, their whole family getting killed.
And it's just one bad thing after another for Daenerys.
Yeah.
You know, her specifically. Because like Viserys just takes out all of his frustration on her. She has nothing. She has nowhere to go. Luckily, that changes as the book goes, though. She gets stronger as it goes.
And that's why we read, and that's why we watch and follow characters, because they change and hopefully for the better.
So you wanted to talk.
I've got one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I got one thing. Not for the inside the episode.
Yeah.
So changing gears to the inside the episode. One thing that I felt, and I really want to hear your thoughts on this, because when I heard that, I was like, oh, I really want to hear what Matt was thinking. No, why did I just say that again?
No, whatever we're knowing about.
They said that, and as you can see, after the halfway point, we're now hurtling full steam ahead. Everything just starts going so much faster, and just, we're rushing towards that season finale. Sort of as if the pacing of the show has suddenly changed and is now just going like a speeding bolt to that season finale. I don't know how you feel about that comment, because shouldn't TV have a sort of pacing to get you there, or should it really be feeling like every episode is just like ramping up finale? However, that only happens as soon as you get halfway through the season. Because that's what I felt. I felt it was just like, oh, the first half of the season was like and now it's serious, everyone.
Now we're serious. It wasn't serious when Sir Waymar Royce died, but now it is. No, the death of Sir Waymar Royce was the first time I realized that George R.R. Martin was willing to kill anyone, including favorite characters like Sir Waymar Royce.
He was the one I had all my money on.
I was hoping he would be,
yeah.
To that end, actually, when he killed Lady, that's when I knew that everything was. That's when I knew all hands were, like, anything was permitted as soon as Lady died, because you don't kill the dog. You don't kill the dog.
Children. Yeah. But the direwolf, no.
What episode we're on? Episode 6?
Yeah, that's episode 6.
I guess that's where all of the machinations take place. I guess that's the throttle. I felt like episode 8 was the episode where all of the what hit the fan. Like, I felt like episode 8 was that. I felt like episode 6 was still building towards a lot of it. But most of the storylines and the characters really mesh together in 8.
Yes.
I think in 8 specific. Yeah, in 8, which is bad to say because it's like, oh, well, that's the George R. R. Martin written episode. But you'll notice some interesting things about that when we get to it.
Should we move on to... Are you ready to move on to 7?
I am ready to move on to 7. I'm going to move on to 7 by going back to episode 5. Because we didn't talk about this at all. And I think this is an important thing that we should talk about is episode 5 is the big argument that costs Neddard the Hand of the King is the fact that Robert Baratheon and all of his people want to send an assassin to kill Daenerys, which leads into episode 7 as well. And Ned says on moral grounds, no, we're no better than Aemon if we're killing children, Robert. And he's like, that's for the Eris. It's for the good of the realm. And I think, like,
by the way, that wasn't me like trying to correct you. That was me just suddenly remembering the name and like, oh,
yeah,
it's a Mad King Aerys.
Yeah. But like that's like I think this is an important idea of like where is everyone coming from? Because the behind the episode on this one gave me pause about what they think that Game of Thrones is, what A Song of Ice and Fire is about. But this comes up in this episode too, where what are the character motivations? What is driving them forward, and how does that cause issues in it? So like is it for the good of the realm not to allow Daenerys succession? Like, to what point in the realm? Because Varys has an interesting statement that he makes, I think in this episode or episode 8, where he's like people wonder what I fight for, and I fight for the good of the realm. And it's like, okay, that's very fascinating because I think the show opens in a scene where we figure out what Middlefinger is all about, which is like the boobiest scene ever.
That was the boobiest scene ever. That was the one scene I was like, made you a little uncomfortable.
Like, why? Why?
That's the scene that you're watching when your parents walk in, like, oh, hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, kids? And you're like, I swear this isn't a porno. This is Game of Thrones. And I swear this scene is important, even though it's not in the book.
I was trying to parse that scene, and I still couldn't.
I don't know.
Oh, he was talking about his backstory.
Yep.
About how much he wants Catelyn.
For some reason.
Missing in action in this episode 7. Sansa, Robb, Arya, Bran, and everybody's favorite, Rickon.
No, Rickon, why?
No, Rickon.
Dang it, dude.
And his dog, and his direwolf, Shaggy Dog. They're all missing.
Dog.
And I have a question on here,
yeah.
Which I think I will ask after when we get to the end of at the end of this episode, and we get and before we get to jump into the exciting one that is episode 8. I think you and I both were very impressed with episode 8, but I will get your take on it. So, okay, 2 quick things. The Wall. Jon takes his vows. Ghost brings him the hand. Grandmother Willow? Those were my notes for that.
Jon and Samwell are just sitting at the tree, and all of a sudden you just hear, listen with your heart, you will understand. All of a sudden, Ghost starts talking to him, and he's like, I listened with my heart, and now I understand. Anyway. Really dumb.
I know, then
Pocahontas
Miko
joke.
and Flick run across. Yeah, Miko and Flick fly across. They're like, what? There's hummingbirds there too? Oh, by the way, one animal that is extinct in our world, but living in Westeros is the aurochs. It's like this huge ox, and they used to exist on planet Earth.
Oh.
They don't anymore, but they're...
no, they were the cows of the medieval times.
They were, yeah. Jon was upset that he's a steward, but he got convinced by his Samwise Gamgee that actually he has a very, very important role to play.
He is being groomed.
Yes. Yes.
No,
Just like all the boys in Winterfell were in episode 1.
We're gross.
And then you have a Theon and Osha scene, and that was the last scene in Winterfell. Other than that, everything was basically. Oh, there is a scene in Vice Dothrak, which I thought was a classic, clever scene about the wine and the poison.
Yes, and a penis.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, are you keeping count of this?
Kind of.
How many are we at now?
3.
Okay.
Well, no, 2. We're at. I don't know. I'm not keeping count.
But then we get to see Jason Momoa get to act again, vowing to ride across the sea. Yeah, that was. So I like watching him act.
I mean, a lot of people do. That's why Aquaman made $1 billion.
Yes.
Jason Momoa doesn't get enough credit for this. Like, he's not listed in the opening credits, and like he has like an also starring credit in the end credits. To be fair, I thought he was going to be in it more, so that's my bad. But he's awesome in it. I mean, as awesome as like they let him be. But
he
go ahead.
Brought that character to life for me. He brought Khal Drogo to life. You're reading in the book and then you see Momoa do it, like, man, and I really like watching him act. He's a really good actor.
He's very he's really charismatic. Let's talk a little bit about Vaes Dothrak.
Sure.
Maybe it's because I read the book, but I saw the whole poison thing coming. But I do like I do like how Sir Jorah, I should call him Sir Jorah because he is a Sir. Sir Jorah like gets the pardon, and when he got as soon as like it might have happened the same in the book, but like as far as the show goes, as soon as he gets the pardon, and then he looks, it's like that should clue your film brain in to be like, oh, this next thing that's gonna happen, and the guy's like, oh, this wine is not good for the Khaleesi. Let me get you this wine. Like, this guy's acting a little suspect.
She shouldn't even be having alcohol.
She shouldn't. She is 14. Well, she's also British, and so they probably have alcohol at a much younger age than we Americans do. So it's.
But not when you're pregnant.
Oh, good point. Oh,
not when you're pregnant.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
To poke the holes in the story, why don't I?
Stupid. Yeah, didn't she have a medical office? Didn't she have a doctor telling her? Like
that kind of bothered me. I don't know why. When I read the book, I never noticed it. But when I'm watching the show, I've got great wine for the Khaleesi. I'm pregnant. I can't.
I'm sorry, I'm pregnant.
And then the assassin's like,
yeah, he just got a very weird line forms on his forehead of like, No, I didn't even think about that. That's true. Like it's a stupid David Benioff and D.B. Weiss always ruining everything. No.
No, that was George R.R. Martin.
I know that's George R.R. Martin.
That's straight out of the books.
But I liked that whole scene, even though like I knew it was coming. I liked how that played out, and of course, obviously, you know, assassin's penis, and then he dies, and that's good. That's good stuff. Good stuff. Let me see.
I do love in fantasy when the characters come to a new town or a new city and the author describes the location and the vast buildings and the bustling marketplaces, all the smells and tastes going through the crowded marketplaces. I love that stuff. And it was cool watching it.
Yeah. It was nice.
I thought that was really, really great. Like that came alive for me. And I really enjoyed that scene.
Yeah. I agree. What we didn't talk about was how the episode started, which is what you really liked, which I'll also point something else out. Tywin Lannister is gutting a stag, and Jaime is there, and they're talking, and it's a This is probably one of the few episodes that has the most point of view jump arounds. Like very little of the story felt like it was told from a main character POV. That's not entirely true, but it starts with a POV from a character who is not a POV character in a Game of Thrones. And he's cutting a stag. What's the Baratheon house? What's their animal?
That's right. Very, very perceptive. Someone made their DC on that one.
Did you notice that when you were watching it?
I can't believe I didn't.
I didn't realize it until I wrote it down.
That.
And then I was like, oh, was that in the book? Oh, wait, it wasn't in the book. So that would have been...
It wasn't, no.
So I don't know if that was written into the script, but there you go. If it was written into the script, you know what? David Benioff and DB Weiss, good on you for that little visual metaphor.
That was a great visual metaphor.
So don't say I don't ever give them props.
Yeah. And I think that one of the biggest props that we can give them is that they made this thing come to life, and they got it off the ground running, and they could have had somebody else write the scripts, but they did it. And let me put it this way. Not every scene is going to be amazing, and yet they still had to write it. They had to write it, and they could have gotten other writers to do it.
Well, they did in some cases.
True.
So,
but
basically, like, what I'm trying to say is, like, good on them for having the visual metaphor in there. Although that could have also been the director, and if you are the director, you should be using visuals that are not communicated in the script to help plus the story, to help add these details onto it.
That's why we love doing this. We love talking about storytelling. We love storytelling. We love talking about it, and we love it in all of its mediums.
Yep. And then, like, you just brought this up, like, it's important to note, and I actually have a note here, the way the other thing is, like, let's jump to King's Landing. The way that they introduce Middlefinger's backstory, like, it's very intentional that it happens in his whorehouse while he's, like, getting all excited, and it's like it's super perverted because he is not a good guy. Like, no. Like, this is it is very intentional. It's a little scummy on the part of the writers, like, oh, we're gonna be the show known for all of the sex and stuff, and it's like, all right, guys, whatever, that's okay, fine. But it is reflective. It is, like, grounded in their interpretation of the character. So I wanted to point that out. It's like, it's a perverted, I have a note here, it's a perverted way to explain him, but it also helps to set up the ending of this episode.
And Roz is in the episode.
She was one
of those. I mean, they already showed her body enough, and they're like, oh, why not throw that actress in here too?
I know.
Very daring actress.
I feel bad. She's so great. Apparently she was in the series premiere.
Wow. Oh, yep. She was Tyrion's.
Yeah, that's right.
That was Roz.
That's right.
They named her.
They did.
Yeah, so the stag, excellent touch. Now, the dialogue between Tywin and Jaime, so in the books, you've only had experiences with Tywin from Tyrion's perspective.
Right.
You don't know how Tywin is with his other children. Tyrion tells you how Tywin... Oh, by the way, Tywin is played by Charles Dance, and he did a...
Charles did.
He's Tywin Lannister. Nailed it. 100%.
Yep.
Tywin. 100%.
He's awesome.
He was wow. And he played that role just very well. But it remains to be seen. I definitely want to watch him act more to see if he kind of gives the same flavor that Tywin gives to me in the book, as far as his character goes in dealing with others. But you know him to be very patient and very quiet, kind of like a lion, right? Stalking a prey, just very quiet, watching, observing, and then pounce at that minute. And Tywin and Jaime. So I don't know Tywin's interaction with his other children. I felt that Tywin was a little too over the top, the writing.
Did you feel like he was the same with Jaime as he was with Tyrion?
No.
Okay.
No. Very different with Tyrion. Okay. Very different. As I was watching, I was like, this is not how he treats Tyrion at all. This isn't like the scenes that I've read him in. And my only thing I can give for the writers is that, well, that's because that Tywin is with his golden son, his golden son Jaime. This is how he talks to Jaime. And yeah, I didn't think that's how he did. But then again, I didn't grow up with them. And these writers, maybe they really got in the head of the character, but I felt like this was actually a little bit out of Tywin's character, the way he had this interaction with Jaime. Okay. Just from my notes on that. But other than that, I thought it was an awesome scene. You know what it was? You know what exactly? I know exactly the point. When he grabbed Jaime's head and was just like talking to him about like how like he kind of loves him. That was the point where I was like, nah, it's a little out of character.
Okay.
Like he wouldn't. Or maybe he would.
Well,
right?
this is
because
yeah. I mean, this gets into the problem. This gets into the problem with point of view character. Oh shoot! This gets into the problem with like writing about non-point of view characters in the show. Is like now they're possibly taking information from later on in the books.
Yes.
And incorporating it closer. But they're doing it in these free radical scenes where it's like especially if it's our first introduction to this character, it could completely throw off what he's actually supposed to be like. With that said, when I read the book, I did not think we were going to meet Tywin Lannister when I first read the book.
I forgot we did too when I first read Game of Thrones. I forgot we met Tywin. I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's in about 2 scenes with Tyrion.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yep.
Very, very few. But you remember them because he's such a character. He's his father. And I don't know if this is revealed before, but I'm sure it will be. Tyrion's mother died in childbirth, giving birth to Tyrion.
They talk about it.
Do they do it inside the episode?
No. They already talked about it. He was like, Tyrion was like, they all look at me like I'm a monster, like, because they don't have the mother. They might have talked about it on the inside the episode, but I thought he talked about it with Bronn on this on this episode when they're like sitting out in the when they're just sitting where they're like walking forward or whatever. They're either walking or might have been episode 8. Episode 8, that's right. Episode 8 is where they're camping out.
Yeah, Tyrion's not in this episode. There's another character not in this episode.
Yeah, Tyrion.
Which is what I want to ask you at the when we're done discussing this one.
Okay.
And then Jaime is he's got quite the tongue. He's very witty with his words, and he's really good at getting people angry. Mm-hmm. He's really good at that. And of course, I'm reading this with future knowledge. Like this is things that I know about the character. And one could say he's a tamed cub with his father there. I don't know.
Right.
But it just seems like really I don't know. I don't know.
We like in that scene, Jaime doesn't really do anything.
We'll talk about it in season 3.
Yeah. Well, are you who are the point of view characters that you've already experienced in A Storm of Swords?
All the characters from the second book, plus Jaime.
Okay. So you have
Jaime's a POV.
Okay, so it is. So you already know he's a POV character now.
Yes, okay. That's why I can tell you that about his character. Which the one scene where he stands in front of Robert, he's like, "How many holes do you think he has in here?" I don't know about. He's like, "He just keeps me out here to make me feel bad," or something. I don't know. I thought that was kind of a weird scene. Yeah,
I like that scene because Jory and Jaime talk about like the battles that they did. But I agree with you. That again. All right, we'll get to that a little. We'll talk about it a lot more in episode 8. Let's talk about Ned confronts Cersei.
Yeah.
And Cersei talks about how, like, the thing that stuck out the most in that scene is, like, Cersei's like, she's like, I loved Robert. Like, I thought I thought I was so lucky that I get to marry him. And lo and behold, like all of the other women thought he was amazing. I got to marry him. I married him. And on our wedding night, as he's taking me, the words that come out of his mouth are Lyanna. And it's just like, oh, that's so sad. But it also is like, okay, well, now I understand why, like, oh, if that's the case, then all my kids are going to be what I want and not what you want. And, you know, like I understand the motivation and where she's coming from. Between that and the scene she had before with Robert, where, you know, where they talk about him being all drunk and everything. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was an incredible chapter in the book. It was.
Yeah, I remember that chapter in the book.
It was really good. It's just memorable. That one has what's the saying that stays with resonance?
Yeah,
resonance. That one has a lot of that resonance in it. And you have 2 incredible actors in that scene, Lena Headey and of course Sean Coolbeans. Yeah, I mean they really, their screen presence and when they were talking about it, and then of course the ultimate line, right? When you play the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die. Of course, you know, she didn't deliver the line like the way I did.
No,
but interesting the way she delivered the line, not the way it was in my mind. I felt like it was a little bit more of what George Lucas says. More intense, more intense, more intense. You win or you die. You know, she kind of said, you win or you die.
Yeah, very
sort of like, this is fact.
Matter of factly, yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, those were my takeaways from the scene.
Yeah. I don't have much more to add. I think, like, you know, yeah. Yeah, I don't have much more to add on that scene. So we can keep moving on the King's Landing storyline.
Yeah, then you've got the big reason why they met. Robert's fatal wounds.
Yes.
So he got super drunk.
Yes.
Not more than usual, apparently. He did not drink more than usual, but he was very drunk when he took on the biggest boar that you've ever seen. And in the books, it gores him from nipple to navel. And in the show, they just show kind of a side wound.
Yeah, it's like this.
Gored.
Yeah, it's like this little prosthetic piece that looks like some Play-Doh.
I'm okay, because in my head, it was like entrails kind of being stuffed in. It was in the books, right? Like his entrails were kind of like put back in him a little bit and sewed up and just like, whoa,
yeah.
So I was nervous when he lifted the blanket just because of how I imagined it from the books, and then I saw the little thing and I was like, Robert wouldn't die from that.
Yeah, I mean he like it might get like, you know, necrotic and stuff. So that's it might have gotten necrotic. But yeah,
but
I was like,
wait, I mean, he takes this huge mortal blow and he still kills it. Like he's awesome. Everybody knows him as like the Fat King, and you just like whatever. But Robert is awesome, and that gets like you just don't know. And in the entire series, you just think he's just some stupid fat king, but he's not. Like he was.
I felt like he was some stupid fat king when I first read the book. Like they have the talk about like the warhammer as he bashed in Targaryen's face.
Rhaegar's chest. Prince Rhaegar.
Yeah, Prince Rhaegar's chest. Yeah.
My question to you. Is King Robert a tragic character? Ooh.
What I mean, I guess I hate to like, because I have to teach this stuff. But what do you mean by tragic? Like, do you think he was undone by his own machinations?
I guess that is what it means to be a tragic character. Well, or was he just the wrong person for the right things to happen to him? Because he was an incredible warrior. He was an incredible warrior. He and Ned went to battle for the crown, and then Theon's dad decided to do an uprising, and Ned and Robert teamed up. Yeah, they teamed up again, brothers in arms, going after him.
Yeah, they actually
and they quelled that one.
The show doesn't do a good job of explaining it. I was looking at some other references, and that's when I found out that the rebellion, that the Greyjoy rebellion or whatever from like the Iron Isles or whatever happened after, like not concurrently and not prior. Like the time that it happened was like they had to, like Robert had to get back up and like kick more butt. I think like I feel bad for him, kind of. Like I feel bad for him that his wife hates him and none of his kids that he thought were his kids are his kids. But as we saw, I think a couple episodes ago, like Robert Baratheon has a lot of kids. He did whatever he wanted to. He never really loved Cersei. Like, it sucks that the one woman that he truly loved died. That's tragic.
But and this in the books, this is a conversation that Ned and Lyanna would think about. And I'm gonna ask you: do you think Robert would have been faithful to Lyanna?
He would have done.
I mean, should we even ask the question, right?
Yeah, like what doesn't even matter. But he didn't. But she died, so it didn't matter. No.
Exactly.
You know what? I guess it depends if he was loyal to her beforehand. Like, would he have been loyal to her beforehand? Because then I think that would have been a consistent strain. Because, I mean, you could make the argument that the reason Robert doesn't find satisfaction in his relationship with Cersei is the fact that she's not what he wants. And so he's constantly, spreading his seed to find the one that he does, to fill the void. Which, again, I think Robert is okay. I love the line that they have where it's like if money won wars, then why isn't Tywin king? Like, that's brilliant. Then why isn't Tywin king and Robert is? It's like, yeah, that's brilliant. Like, that's a good question. If you could just buy victory. But this is the perfect episode to talk about all of that stuff. Because I don't know. I don't think he's tragic.
Would you consider the... Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Would you consider the character in Citizen Kane to be a tragic character? Ooh, I'm really getting to the film.
So if the tragedy is the fact that you're undone by your own machinations and hypocrisy, then yes. But I think that, like, I think one of the things that people don't realize is, like, you can love the movie Citizen Kane and not like Charles Foster Kane. That is fine. I think in some ways he is. I guess because he wants, in the case of Citizen Kane, he wants to be loved so badly that, like, he wants to be loved for himself, for being himself so badly. And the world constantly conspires to take that ability away from him. Because, like, his parents give him away, and then the person who raises him doesn't respect him, and then he drives all of his friends away, and he finds love from someone who doesn't even realize who he is, and then he gets caught. And he can't, and even though he can formulate the opinions of other people through his newspapers, he never gets the feeling that his readers loved him. So, and then he ended up dying alone. So yeah, he's tragic.
So I kind of think about that with Robert because he went up against. Well, he didn't actually go for the crown. He just went up against Rhaegar. He wanted to get revenge.
Right. Yeah, that's
the
true.
Helen of Troy story.
Yeah, I would agree he's tragic in this sense. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then by suddenly doing that, and it's not Robert's fault, but Jaime killed the Mad King. Robert didn't.
Nope.
Right? Ned ran into the throne room at the time, and he saw the blood on Jaime's sword with Jaime. My favorite image is a bad guy on the throne, right? One leg slung over the armchair or the arm handle. I think that just looks that's like a very powerful image for me. But no, Jaime was. You can't do that to the Iron Throne because the swords are gonna gore you.
Right.
Jaime was sitting on the throne, and he just he stood up with Ned, and Ned could have been king right there, but no. Then this is where I think the tragedy comes in because Robert never wanted to be king. Never. But he was. And he got the most beautiful, richest woman in the Seven Kingdoms. So he got an incredible beauty. He is king. One could say he had everything. And yet he was empty inside. So that's how I see him as a parallel to, I'm sorry, I forgot the name for
Charles Foster Kane.
Charles Foster Kane. That's how I see them similar, is that also Kane had all the money in the world and he probably had no shortage of women and because of his money and stuff. But in the end, died unhappy in a place. Actually, that's not true. Robert actually died happy because he killed the boar.
Yeah.
That's one thing Robert was good at, is killing.
So that's an excellent point. And oh shoot, you were gonna say something. Yeah,
I said what I was gonna say.
No, I was gonna say it reminds me of The Last Duel. How Matt Damon's character, Jean de Carouge, was only happy when he was fighting. He only found usefulness when he was in combat, and that was the same with Robert Baratheon. It's he only found usefulness when he was in combat.
100% agree.
So let's actually use Robert Baratheon as a jumping off point, because then what happens is they talk about Renly Baratheon confronts Eddard, and is we gotta capture, so going back to Robert for a second, Robert stupidly calls everyone out of the room and is I need you to write these words on this piece of paper that say, Eddard, you are going to be the regent until Joffrey comes of age, and Neddard puts my rightful heir comes of age. It's stupid because he needed at least one other witness who would back him on this, which comes into play later. So at this point, Neddard has realized that all of Robert's children have gold hair. And if they have gold hair, apparently in Westeros is a recessive trait. So being blonde...
The seed is strong. The seed is strong.
Seed is strong.
Seed is strong.
So Neddard comes to the conclusion that all of the kids are Jaime and Cersei's kids, including Prince Joffrey. No, Prince Joffrey's coffee.
And did they give... and as King Robert was dying, they gave him milk of the poppy. Milk of the poppy.
Which is I guess what
painkiller.
It's
morphine. Puts you to sleep.
Yeah. So then Ned goes out and Renly's look, we need to steal Joffrey away and train him to be a good king. And Neddard is but he's not the rightful heir. The rightful heir is Stannis. And Renly's bro, Stannis is a moron, and he's terrible. Do you really think he'll be a better king? And he's oh, but...
I want to know who's going to be his actor. I want to know who's going to act as Stannis so bad. And I'm not going to find out until season 2 starts. Then I'll be oh, they got him for Stannis. Okay.
If you even know who he is. But anyway, regardless.
Yes.
Wait, you're There's a character who you're now familiar with that isn't in Davos. Do you know Davos?
Oh yeah.
You've met Davos?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm excited for you to meet the actor who plays as Davos. Anyway.
Oh, sweet.
Anyway, so all right, so Renly's
I love Davos. Davos is awesome.
Renly's confronting Neddard, and he's like, dude, come on, like, Stannis is going to be a terrible king, you know he is, but we have to get Joffrey away because we might still have time to make him not a conniving Lannister. We can still do this. And Neddard is like, no. So, and this brings me back to Varys is for the realm. So when we talk about motivations, and this is where I think the creators don't understand their own show, which we'll talk to in the behind the episode, but Renly's motivation is for the good of the realm. Do a little bad. We can make the realm a safe and secure place this way. It was kind of the same track they were taking with Daenerys. Like, oh, we need to kill Daenerys. But Neddard only thinks about what is right and just and the proper succession. To which Renly comes up with the great point, and I don't know if this was in the book, but Renly is like, oh, I'm sorry, how did Robert ascend to the throne? Was it through succession? No, he killed someone. Like,
no, that was in the books.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like,
there's pretty parallel, very parallel.
Perfect. Because it's brilliant. It's like, that's an excellent point. Like we have all, like, Neddard is bound by all of these weird rules and restrictions he's placed on himself.
He is.
And what he thinks is right, and which most of the readers think he's right to do. And maybe it's just because, like, the actor for Renly does a really good job. And of course Neddard blows him off because he's like, no, you like the Knight of the Flowers, knightly flower. But it's like, that's an excellent point. Like, maybe Renly would be best for the kingdom. Maybe it's better to have someone who can anticipate the problems to be the king. And Ned dismisses this outright. He's like, no, why? No, you just want a power grab. And he's like, no, I want what's good for the realm.
I still think that Renly is Prince Humperdinck. What's good for the realm?
Maybe. Like, what's good for the realm? Not me, but the realm.
I've got 100 soldiers at your whim.
Yeah,
and I am never wrong.
And Ned.
And then he runs away.
Ned dismissed him. No, Ned dismissed him. Ned's like, no, dude.
No, he's like, okay, it's great to. I thought that Ned was like, yeah, let me use your forces, and he's just like, okay, and then like he runs away.
No, I read it as and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but I read it as Ned is like, no, we're not stealing the kid, and Renly's like, then why would I give you my soldiers? You're gonna do something stupid, and guess what? Ned does something stupid.
He does, and then he's like, oh, okay. Littlefinger, you got my back, right? Like you're gonna pay all the guards and make sure, like, oh, don't worry, I'll find the coin. We'll make sure that they're your men. Okay, where's the crown borrowing from? The Lannisters.
No, they don't talk about that in the show, though. They don't do that in the show. In the show, they're just like, he's just like middle finger. You're with me, right? And like they make it really clear, and I think they make it like subtly clear in the book that he's like, oh, I'm for Caitlyn, but Neddard thinks that he's for him. So because I've read the book, I knew this.
Yeah. And
so as we go in the show, I'm going to probably think like, oh, wow, that's so brilliant. I didn't see it coming. And Lucas will probably be like, no, dude, it was like, if you read the book, like, you know, this was foreshadowed very clearly. You would really, like, after reading it, you would have seen it. Because that's what I thought when watching this. I was like, he said he was for Caitlyn. He said he'd do anything to help Caitlyn. Like, they made it really clear in the show. Like, I will help. I'll do anything for you, Caitlyn.
He had a monologue. He had a monologue about it.
And then,
a whole monologue about it.
Yeah. Which actually, I was glad because they explored that backstory, which is kind of just like in the book and not really talked about. But so he has that, and then I guess he thought he would get the. Go ahead. Oh.
No. It's just the last shot of the episode.
middle finger.
Not getting it. You're not getting the.
I freaking hate middle finger.
With a knife to the throat.
Yeah.
Two faces next to each other. It's like that was.
Like what did middle finger even say? But like middle finger is only for himself, right? So we talk about.
I told you not to trust anyone.
Right. And we talk about the different motivations of these characters, like what are driving them forward. So middle finger is just for himself. This is also the first time we hear the term bend the knee, which we're going to hear a lot.
A lot. Bend the knee.
Bend the knee. Bend the knee. Bend the knee. Bend the knee. Bend the knee.
I can't wait for somebody to like just string that up as a bunch of cuts.
My God. It's already out there.
It probably is.
So, does he go?
Sorry.
Does he go to Viserys or to Varys as well, and is like, Varys, you're with me? No, he doesn't. Does he?
No, he doesn't.
And even
because Ned is, I don't want to say that he's stupid, but I will say this: he is so out of his element. He is just completely out of his element. He does not. He trusts the word of others. Even though in the books, he's like, I don't know if I can trust him. He's telling me the truth. Can I trust him? Does he have my back? Does he not? In the end, he trusts him. He does.
Yeah.
And he can't play the Game of Thrones.
Well, and the best part to me is like, Cersei's like, I'm going to be the regent queen. And Neddard is like, all right, I've got my men here and I've got this piece of paper that says this. I'm handing it to an honorable knight, and the knight gets it and reads it out. And Cersei's like, rip. What statement from,
And again, this is where Neddard is so far out of his element. Great father, great soldier, great man. Completely out of his element because he doesn't stop and say, those were the king's words. Is that how you felt about the king?
But at that point,
is that how you're going to honor his memory?
But at that point, it wouldn't even matter because there's already all of these people who don't care. Like the only people who care about the honor of it and the decency of it, like I don't know why he didn't just go out and about and be like, oh, but Joffrey, the heir, is not the true heir. Joffrey is your and Jaime's son, and like. Obviously, all of the people in that room know it, except for like the soldiers. All of the scheming people know it.
He's out of his element. He just doesn't know what to do. He's just. This is not his place. He was never supposed to be there. Robert forced him to be there.
Yep.
The tragic, right? I mean, it's tragic.
Yep.
And he gets the knife to the throat at the end, which I thought was a great scene at the end. A great visual to close the show. Yeah. Or close the episode.
Yep. Is there anything else you want to talk about the episode specifically, or can I get into the behind the inside the episode?
There were two things. Okay. And we're probably going to go on a little tangent here. One of them is, was Robert really a bad king? There's this show Veep. And one of the characters says, everybody knows that the government would run great if there were no president. And in that vein, Robert never really ruled. John Arryn ruled as hand of the king. There was a lot of peace then. And then, of course, Ned came along in like the last, 4 or 5 months. Robert didn't really do anything. So, was he really that bad of a king?
I mean, history is written by the victors, right? Like they even have a comment there where it's like, from one point of view, Robert Baratheon is like a savage, rebellious leader who took over and conquered the land. Here's the only reason I would say Robert Baratheon is a bad king. I mean, I think you're right. I think Jon Arryn keeping the peace was important, even though he kept the peace to the extent that all of this stuff was boiling under the surface. Ready to explode.
True, but there was peace.
And look, all he had to do was not confront Cersei that he knew the truth, and it would have been fine. Or go through different channels to reveal the information, and it would have been fine. Not Ned, not Nedder. I mean Jon Arryn. Jonathan
Right,
could have gone through different channels. Robert was a bad king because the entire kingdom owed a giant. The entire kingdom was completely in debt to the Lannisters. That's why he's a bad king.
Good point.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's that. Yeah.
My opinion is that he was a great king, but terrible person, and he didn't do anything. He was, and he was. If you knew him and you knew all the behind the scenes stuff, horrible king.
Yeah.
But from a peasant, there's peace for like 10, 14 years. Great king.
Yeah.
And he's kind of and his memory is silly. He's this big, fat, drunken guy, but he's super jolly.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like all the good memories. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. All these good memories are flowing forth. So, I think, to your point about it being written by the victors, I think he will be remembered by a peasant as a good king.
Yeah. Life sure was good under Robert. Now we're at war and everyone's dying and winter's freaking coming. What was your second thing?
My last question about it, and then you can do the inside the episode, was do you like the way they weaved it into this season so far? Because at season 8, everybody's in it.
At episode
Everybody's
8.
in there. Yes. But have you enjoyed, or not enjoyed, but do you like the way that they weaved it where for 2 episodes, there were no Jon? For this episode, Tyrion wasn't in it.
Jon was in the last episode, wasn't he?
Well, he was in 7, but he wasn't in 6 and 5. He was in episode 5, and he wasn't in episode 6.
Okay.
He wasn't in those 2 episodes because they didn't go to the wall.
Right.
And Daenerys wasn't in episode 5.
Right.
So do you like the way that they kind of cut some of the characters out like that? They obviously did a lot in King's Landing because they had to tell that story, because that's a big story arc right there. But it left a lot of characters out, and then they left them out of the show. Like this episode, Robb wasn't in it. Arya wasn't in it. I don't think Robb was in... Oh, Robb was in 6. But I just want to hear your thoughts on that from like a storytelling and television. Because it's an ensemble cast. It's hard.
Yeah, I guess I have to think that it's fine because they have so many threads dangling at this point that they have to pick and choose what's important to cover and what's important not to cover. I guess it works seamlessly enough that it feels okay. I think some of the time manipulation stuff gets weird. Did they go? No, they didn't go to. Because I think Caitlyn is about to I don't know, like some of the timing stuff, especially in the next episode where it's like the Ravens are like email. It moves so fast.
Yes.
Starts to become a little bit like suspect. I guess it's okay enough that it doesn't
then you forget about characters.
That it doesn't really bug me too much. Like we remember the character and their storyline just enough. Actually, one of the things that did bug me is that the storyline of Jon to the stewards wasn't told very well, in the sense that they did not lay enough groundwork for when he gets it to feel like he's been like I felt bad finding out because they foreshadow it earlier in the episode. But I didn't even know that there were 2 branches of the steward and the Night Watch. Like they should have built that up in previous episodes to execute it here. They do
in the books because he's on top of the wall doing his thing, right, and everybody else is doing other things, and he's just stuck doing nothing.
Right, and show that hey, he's actually the best ranger. Show that he has all of the skills they need. Reinforce this fact, and then bring down the hammer when the one guy who doesn't like Jon. Build up that contesting relationship better. Things like that. I feel like they should have kind of paced better. That's, I think, the one thing though that sticks out the most, because the idea, like the way that they incorporate Sir Jorah Mormont in and his storyline, I think they do a really good job. It's almost like, even though Daenerys is the point of view character in the book, in the show, Jorah Mormont's kind of more of the point of view character, especially for this episode and last episode. It's like, it's almost not even about Daenerys, which again might also go towards like the showrunners not really feeling comfortable writing female characters.
Ooh, hot take.
I said it last time when I felt like they did Sansa dirty the whole every episode she's in. That's why I pointed out, like, the only reason they feel comfortable writing Arya is because she's a tomboy. They write Daenerys. They write Daenerys.
How about Caitlyn? How about Caitlyn? How do you think they write her?
I think the actress does a lot to make her compel. Like, what she does in the books and how the actress acts makes her compelling. More than, like, because I mean, like, was she in this episode? She wasn't in this episode.
She wasn't in this episode. No.
And in the last episode.
Oh, maybe they didn't. Yes, thank you.
In the last episode, like, all they did with Caitlyn was, like, do some shots of her looking nervous and worried. And, like, that's the actress acting. And Lisa's basically Lady Macbeth. So, it might change as it goes, but, like, maybe they do write very compelling female characters. But I don't know.
But they have to be the writers of the episode. So let's see. This is an interesting thought that you have. As we move on through the show, we can see if this is a trend, or maybe they got better at it, or maybe we misinterpret it. But I think it's a pretty hot take. Yeah. I'm interested to see how well this continues, because the female characters in Game of Thrones are very, very. One could watch this show and say that's very sexist.
Right.
But it's, this isn't the time or place to discuss this.
Yeah.
Because we will have much more.
And we have another episode. And I mean, you've read the book, so like, if I say that Sansa as a character develops in the books in a certain way, you can confirm it to a degree, I'm sure. At this point, like, that she's changed from, so,
well, that's what I had. So your thoughts on inside the episode.
So inside the episode, the writers say, and again, this is one of many themes of the show, but it seems like this is the one, like, this statement stuck out to me. They said, they think that in this show, the people who are good, they either said the people who are good or the people who are honorable get punished, and the people who are schemers get rewarded and win. So, like, the people you would think should win lose, and the people who should be punished or lose win. I think that's a gross simplification of Game of Thrones, but I think that's a theory that a lot of people latch onto, that there's so much bad happening, and all of the bad characters or the evil characters or the scheming characters, they always manipulate and win, and all of the honorable characters always seem to lose. I do not agree with that.
I heard that the characters are super honorable, bad things happen to them, but as soon as the good characters do something bad, that's when hellfire rains down on them. As we see what happens to Ned Stark.
Right. Well, okay, but let's be clear. Like, Ned's the reason, and here's why I think they have no idea what they're talking about. And obviously they do. I'm being hyperbolic. But here's why I think they're wrong. Renly, like, I think it has to do with how they choose to display their interest. So Ned was kind of punished for saying, we shouldn't kill Daenerys. That's wrong. However, for the good of the realm, it's probably a good thing to kill the line of crazy inbred kings, right? For all the rest of the people in the world, it probably isn't a bad thing to get rid of the people who are bad. But Ned isn't wrong. It's like she's not doing anything across the sea. When she does something across the sea, then we should retaliate. And Robert is like, yeah, that is actually a better option than just outwardly assassinating her. However, Neddard also thinks that Stannis Baratheon should be king, who we haven't met yet, but is not quite seen as the most stable, considering that Stannis is his older brother. Is that right? Stannis is...
I thought Robert was the oldest brother.
Okay, I thought Stannis was older, but like Renly, like when Renly appeals and he's like, look, for the good of the realm, Stannis should not be king. For the good of the realm, we need to take Joffrey away and teach him how to be a just ruler. And Ned's like, no, we're got to follow the letter of the law. We have to be the paladins here. So I don't think that like the honorable thing to do in this situation is to put someone on the throne that is going to just cause more war. So I don't think Ned being I don't think Ned was the good guy when he decides to hijack the will of Robert Baratheon. Right?
Well, he certainly committed a lie.
Yeah.
And he's an honorable character acting dishonorable.
And
that's when he gets punished.
Yep. And like
not earlier for going against the king. That's not punishment, but now for doing that one falsehood, he gets punished.
So my other thing is like, because like Renly Baratheon, like he's I'm for the people, but let's say he is for the people. Varys also is like, I'm for the realm. Like, who do you fight for? I fight for the good of the realm. So like, do you having, as far as you are in the book, do you still agree that he's doing what he thinks is best for the realm? Or do you think he's doing...
Who, Varys? Or
Varys.
Varys or Renly?
Varys. I'm more interested in Varys.
Hard to say. At this point, it's hard to say.
Because Middlefinger is all about himself. But he also... He's scheming for his own success and self-preservation.
We would have to see how season 2 of the show plays out. Okay. I can't...
Does he become more nuanced?
It's... let's wait till we get through that. I could very clearly tell you about it.
Okay. So
very easily, very clearly tell you about it.
Okay. But
I can't right now because I don't know how the show does.
Okay. Well, right, and we'll get to it I guess when we get to it in the books. But what I'm saying is their interpretation of this theory of like the honorable are always punished is not true. The honorable are punished, like the honorable aren't like always punished. People are punished for not being smart. I guess is the best way to put it. Like Jon Snow is punished because he's not very smart, and then when he gets smart, I'm talking about like in his own, when he's on the wall, it's like when he gets smart and he starts acting intelligently and understanding the situation and reacting to the situation in an appropriate way, then he starts to succeed.
Right.
So, I mean, I think your interpretation of like the honorable, but I would even say like the people who don't read the situation well get punished. Like all of the knights changing hands, like, yeah, the people who bought them out are reading the situation and they're like, let's see, Neddard has no men here. Cersei has all of the men and all of the gold. Let's go with the smart person.
No.
Let's
City Watch.
I don't know. I feel like their interpretation is just like, oh, if a character does good, they're gonna die, and it's like that's not.
No.
I don't know if that's fully true, because guess what? One person who poisoned Jon Arryn, he dead. He wasn't good. He wasn't smart though, and now he's dead.
He is.
So that was the point.
That's very interesting. Yeah, very interesting take. I love that perspective. Well done.
Should we move on to episode 8 so we can get out of here? I know we're running long.
I know, but it's just so good. Episode 8 was
it's so good, and we're probably going to talk about it the least. So,
I know.
Episode 8 is the pointy
My favorite
end.
so far.
It's your favorite so far?
So far, yes, absolutely. All the characters get a ton of screen time, except for maybe when they discover the dire wolves at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
And just how mysterious everything is. Actually, I actually like the first episode, but we can listen to ourselves talk about that again. Winter fell on the feast. Weren't those good times? I guess that's why I bring it up, because those were good times. Because now things aren't.
No.
All right. Should we do the king? Okay. We got.
Let's start wherever you want to start.
All right. I'll just go down through my list here. I've got King's Landing first.
Okay.
Because that's where most of the stuff happens. So Arya's running around, and she watches Syrio Forel fight off 3 red cloaks. Here's the thing too. In the beginning of the episode, you see people running around with red cloaks, and the colors actually matter. Red cloaks are red for Lannister. So those are Lannister men. They're not City Watch. Those are Lannister men. The gold cloaks are the City Watch.
Okay.
And the white cloaks are the Knights Guard. Those are the best in the realm. So Arya's with Syrio Forel doing her dancing lesson, and that's when they get upon by some red cloaks, of course, led by, you don't know his name, but I do, Sir Meryn Trant.
Okay.
That's the knight's name. And so Syrio beats off the others because he's amazing. The first sword of the Braavosi. Love him to death.
Literally.
And then you have this,
because he dies in this episode. It's implied.
He does die. It's implied, and it's implied very strongly, because the knight who kills him, or the knight who fights him, Sir Meryn Trant, he's still a Knight's Guard, and he's still there, and he's there later on at the gathering around Joffrey.
Okay.
Now, you don't really see him because you can barely see his face. He just looks like some evil grinning Fulio with like a goatee. That's all you can see. But then it's like one of those, if you look closely enough, there he is. He's right there. See? It's like, yeah, but it's really hard. So I feel like that could have been, have him show his face, and then the King's Guard around the king just zoom in and be like, there he is. He's alive. He's the one that fought Syrio, and he's there. And I felt like that wasn't really touched upon. So that was something that I was a little disappointed on how they did that in the show versus the books. I mean, even in the books, it's very subtle. Mm-hmm. Like, unless you're really like, oh yeah, that's Meryn Trant. Oh, look, there he is again. Yep, Syrio, he lost and he died because Meryn Trant's still there. That's. But I love Syrio. I love Syrio Forel. He was my man.
Rip.
Yeah, I thought he was gonna. I thought he and Arya were gonna go sailing across the sea, but oh well. And then again, you get this super hard cut fight scene, which you don't know what's going on because
it's one of the better ones. But yeah, it's still not. It's.
Neddard is in the dungeons.
Yes.
He meets Varys, and that's where he says, "For the good of the realm."
Yep.
And the last part on King's Landing, and then I'd love to hear your take on all this, is from the point of view from Sansa, as this is at the very end of the episode, where she's walking up and sees everybody around and the big thing, and early in the episode, Septim Mordain tells him to run for your life, and she sees the Hound, and she pleads for her father's life. One of my favorite moments, though, was when, and I feel like this is a very key moment, but even reading the book, so far nothing has come of it. They take away the Lord Commander of the King's Guard. They take away his knighthood. They say you're no longer a part of it. His name is Sir Barristan Selmy, and he is very well respected by Neddard. And now that you know he's no longer a King's Guard, it makes you want to go back and rewatch it again, because you get to see the scenes, and you always see Ned give him such high praise and such high respect. And for Joffrey
to just dismiss him
away. Yeah, and he looks at them with the sword, and he's just like, I could cut through all 5 of you.
Yep.
And you know it's true, because he trained them. He knows all their moves. He knows exactly what they're going to do. And he's still really good. But they think he's too old, and
they don't think he's too old.
Know.
They're manipulating because they want Jaime to be in charge, because they want all the power.
Right.
So it's not that he's too old.
That's what it is.
They take him off the board. They're taking him off the board
said.
of the throne of the game. Yeah, that's why. You actually missed.
And
go ahead.
I missed that.
No. I
I
wasn't saying you missed that. But go ahead.
One last thing is that Janos Slint, he's the captain of the King's Guard. Why did he turn on Ned? Because now he is Lord of Harrenhal, and Harrenhal will be quite an interesting location.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
remember that name. Remember
Harrenhal.
that name. Okay.
So the one thing you did miss was the Hound captures Sansa, which I'm hoping I always thought they had an interesting relationship in the book, and I hope that continues. Because she's like both scared of him and also pities him and kind of likes him.
It's very complicated. I love it.
I like it too. That was my favorite when I found out about when she learned about his backstory and everything. Like I was like, oh, okay, this is getting complex. But you forgot the scene where Sansa's summoned in, and Cersei and like all of the big manipulators, Cersei and Middlefinger and Varys and Grand Maester Pycelle.
No, Dumbledore! He's back!
I thought you said you liked him, but he also seems to be a sinister man, a manipulator. So it will be interesting to see how that develops. But he seems...
You look at all those Vipers. And you're like, yeah, Ned had no chance.
No, he didn't. And poor Sansa has no chance either, as they manipulate her so easily. And I guess it's that one's more of the Alfred Hitchcock bomb, where the idea of suspense in this case, I think creating irony is a better sense of it, where you've seen these people manipulate everyone. And then all of them are in one room. And they've teased that Joffrey still likes Sansa because he got her that necklace a couple of episodes ago. So she's still like thinks that he likes her because she's just not old enough to be able to handle that the gift is false. And they all basically tell her to write a letter, one to Caitlin and one to Rob, to bend the knee for Joffrey.
Bend the knee.
And so that's a major scene because, they send the letters out and both of them are like, oh, is it Sansa saying this? No, it's the Queen saying this.
It's the Queen's words, yeah.
No, mainstream. And
well, so I did.
I have the synopsis up here, so that's why I remember that. I was like, oh yeah, that's a major
plot point because that right there drives everything that happens next.
Yes.
Okay.
Where are we going to next?
Next, I've got Tyrion next.
Okay.
He makes his way back with Bronn, and he runs into the Stone Crows and the Burned Men, and then there's a female hill tribe, but they're the hill tribes. Mm-hmm. Shagga, I'm going to cut off your balls and feed them to goats. That's Shagga.
Yep.
And then you have my favorite of the Burned Men, and of course in the books it's clearly much more detailed because I know it's Timett, son of Timett. So he's one of the hill tribes.
I'm trying to think of who was that one.
He's the one who was missing an eye.
Okay.
It's okay. You'd miss it too. I mean, I knew what because I read the books.
Right. He's a character
to look out for. Yeah. And then they escort him to Tywin. And in the books, they go to the inn at which Tyrion was captured. That is where Tywin makes his headquarters. The very same inn where Tyrion had all those swords pointed to his neck from all the people.
Interesting.
I don't think it was the same in the show.
It's not. He's in a tent.
That's right. Yeah. So I don't know where they are on the map in the show.
I don't know.
But
either.
in the books, you know where he is in the books, because they're clearly gearing up for war, and George R. R. Martin has where all these armies are plotted.
Right.
So yeah, Tywin's like, okay, yes, ride with them. In the books, this is what I really like. Whenever you when you get introduced to Tywin for the first time, they go through his titles. There's sat Tywin, head of Lannister, Warden of the West, and former Hand of the King, and they go through all the titles, and you're just reading this like, nobody's telling you this. Like, this is the author telling you all these, like, he's, the Lion of Lannister, all that stuff. You're like, oh, okay, and I like that as a reader, because you're like, okay, on a more subconscious note, maybe a punch in the face note, it's probably an important character.
Right.
And Tyrion has to ride with the Hills tribe, especially with Timbit, son of Timbit. I don't think the actor did it that way, but I wish
that's how you see him. It's also like you get the sort of fantasy trope of like him and Bronn, Tyrion and Bronn are like camping and stuff, but then
we're just gonna say Bronn that way the whole time.
Bronn. But then they get confronted, and Tyrion uses his mind in order to get them out of it, which is always fun. But then when he's like, okay, I'm at my father's tent, like life is gonna be good, and then he's like, oh yeah, and the Hill tribe are like, no, we're taking him with us because like we need to make sure that he makes good. And you just look at poor Peter Dinklage's face, and he's just like, what? You're gonna make me do what? What now? Oh,
yeah. Tyrion is always the underdog.
And it's great.
I mean, he and Bronn were just two, and 3 hill tribes came and were about to get him. Again, the underdog, and he comes through. And now he's like, you got it right in the front. Again, the underdog. He is the underdog for sure. Inside the episode says this. Your favorite part of the show. They're cannon fodder. Tywin's going to use them as cannon fodder. Right. That's what they said on the inside the episode.
Which is kind of obvious.
I never really felt that way.
In the book?
Maybe it's because I'm just not smart like that, which is possible. I just don't have much experience in warfare tactics, or especially in medieval times. Obviously, they're like, oh, you're going in the vanguard, you're going in the front. But I never felt that way, because I've always felt that Tywin is very, very wise, and he's going to use the best pieces to their best potential. And maybe the Hill tribe is the best at the front. Or maybe because of their savage nature, he's the one who would attack the supply train instead of being at the front of the fight. Or I don't think he sees him as just cannon fodder, because there were no cannons back then.
Right.
But
I mean, I think...
Or I should say, in that world. But.
I think, like, that's actually interesting, because my first thought was, like, if I'm a king, if I'm, like, this great lord, and my son has promised them money, and they're still willing to fight for me for more money, I'm going to put them in the front line, because if they're as good as they say they are, then they'll help me win the war, and I'll pay them, because it'll be worth it. And if they're not, then I don't have to pay them at all. So it's a win-win for me. That's my thought. So that's why when
thank you, Tyrion. Thank you, Tyrion.
Well, I don't think he's happy about it. I think he's like, oh, these are 3 more mouths I have to feed. But if I can harness them and use them well, and if not, at the very least, they're dead bodies that I can throw at the enemy and expend their energy. Is my understanding of it.
I'm cool with disagreeing, but I think you have the right of it.
I'm taking the best of yours and their ideas from what I saw and putting them together. It's a no.
That's a great take.
It's a no. Maybe Tyrion was like, it's a no lose if you put him in the front line. I don't know.
Tywin never thanks him.
Nope.
Tywin's not happy to see him.
Nope.
Interesting character dynamic. Yeah, that's I'm not going to say any more about it.
Okay.
Because I could, now I've got Caitlin. She leaves the Vale. She joins up with Rob. Where? I don't know. The timing's off. Because
Timing is weird.
My chronology is a little bit off when I wrote that. Because prior to that, Rob gets the info about Sansa.
The only non-POV...
Calls the banners!
The only non-POV... actually, there's one other non-POV scene, but they're both Rob scenes.
Bran's in there. So it's Rob from the point of view of Bran.
One of the times. Then the second time, I don't think Bran is there. Bran is there for one of them, but not for both of them. One of them, I think, is like if I had to I think like when they get the original letter, that one you have Theon and Rob.
Yes,
in there.
Right.
And so I think if you were going for POVs from the books, because in A Clash of Kings, Theon's a POV character, you could make the argument that George R.R. Martin was using Theon as a POV character. But otherwise, almost every other scene in that episode is told from a POV character from the book, which I liked.
And this happens off page in the books, which might interest you, just because it happens on screen in the show. And that is when the great John Umber gets all loud, like, why are we going to listen to Rob? Why are we listening to that guy? And then, Grey Wind comes and mauls in, and he's just like, ha, ha, ha. And then, they all laugh, and that happens off page in the book. Just, that is a scene that George R.R. Martin told. He didn't show. He told that. And, you often wonder why. Why didn't he show that scene? Why did he tell it? So that's actually something that I appreciate in the show. However, you don't get the other names. You don't get the Karstarks, not the Starks, the Karstarks. One of the minor houses, the Bannermen. I think the Reeds, Manderley. I mean, all of a sudden, you get all these names, and you're like, it's a lot of names. But the only one that matters is, the great John Umber. So you get to see that character. You see him also in the Hill Tribes. You see him, it's probably even the same actor. I just feel like you kind of get these larger-than-life folk in there. They take like a major role, but I thought that was great. Did you read about what George R.R. Martin's thought of for that, calling the banners?
No.
So I read that he wanted to show all the horses leaving all the different castles from all the different locations with all their banners and liveries and everything. Rob looks and says, call the banners. And then they shoot to all the different bannermen, and all their knights and their foot soldiers ride out to Winterfell to do this great big meeting. Or I don't even know if it's in Winterfell.
Right.
Maybe it's a little bit more south.
Right.
No, it's got to be Winterfell. I'm so sorry, because Bran's there.
Yeah. It has to, because
Bran can't travel.
That's right. Yeah. And we see Rickon today in the episode too. We see
Rickon. We get to see. We do, because Rob's leaving and he's saying goodbye, and that hit home a little bit, and for the folk who are in the armed services, things like that, and the families with them. I'm sure it's, obviously I don't want to drop, this is a fiction fantasy thing,
right.
but that would be the only parallel that I could think of to relate to that scene. But yeah, I did feel a little choked up inside when he said goodbye, especially because all of the family that went south, they haven't come back. None of them have come back to Winterfell. So those were my thoughts on that.
You go to King's Landing, you never come back.
Yeah. Did you have any thoughts on that? There's only one more thing, and that's the Dothraki that I've got.
We didn't talk about being at the wall, but
oh my God, you're right. I didn't put that in my notes.
But as far as the North, it's fun to see Robb, and also Hodor's penis.
No, Osha.
More information from Osha, and she talks about she teases the stuff behind the wall, like the White Walkers or whatever.
he's riding the wrong way.
Right. Which I think
Robb Stark,
like is it safe to say that like that's a major theme is like there's so much internal bickering in Westeros that they're forgetting the big existential threat beyond the wall? Is that something that comes up in the books at all? Because like I remember reading about it and I was like, what's the point of the White Walkers like being like them talking about it? Like the prologue, Sir Waymar Royce potentially killed by White Walkers. I don't know. But I remember in the book thinking like that's gonna play a lot larger role, and like it does. It doesn't. It kind of does, but it doesn't. So I'm wondering if there's any expansion of that in the books.
As I was reading Game of Thrones the first time, I told you this a little bit ago, but yeah, all this bickering stuff, they're going the wrong way. I felt like everybody is focused on that throne.
Yeah.
And against each other, and all these rivalries and things like that. And you have this horrible unknown force. Because it's not just the White Walkers over there, right?
True.
You know, they hinted at there's giants there. They hinted that, no, there's Mance Rayder.
Oh,
He's
Mance
out there
Rayder!
Too. And you have this, like, really scary thing that hadn't been seen in over, 8,000 years starting to show up. And you look at the state of the wall, and it's very, very thin. And the only people that are there, no knights are there. They're just like, you know, everybody wants to do something else instead. You know, be a great warrior or an actual knight or something, and instead of there, which I get. It's cold, it sucks, it's horrible. But you defend the realm, except they haven't needed to, because there's been no threats. But now there is. So I've always felt like the way the story's going to happen is they're all bickering, and it's all going to go into complete chaos. Daenerys is going to somehow gather a huge following, meet up, and my hope, right? Meet up with Jon and the two of them, and unite Westeros against all the forces in the north. That's how I could think the macro level of the story would play out. I don't know.
Okay.
Nobody knows, except for those who have seen the show.
Right.
But it might go different in the books.
Right.
But that was always, like, when I started to get to this point, that was my sort of point of view of where this was going to head.
Okay.
But yes, go ahead and describe what happens on the wall. Very key.
They find 2 dead bodies. They bring it in, and I think either Jon or Sam is like, we should just burn them. And who was it? Was it Sam who was like, they don't smell?
It was.
Like if they were,
and in the books, they challenge him a lot. They don't believe him. And he keeps using logic and reasoning, and they can't fight it because he's right.
I need to reread these books.
But there'd be a smell.
Go on.
He's like, there'd be a smell. Like, well, maybe they're too cold to have the smell. Well, if they're too cold to have the smell, then, you know, their blood is where's their blood? Like, their skin color would be different.
Yeah. But
it's not different. It's this. And like, well, it has to be this instead. And it's just like, no. Like, because of XYZ. Like, it's just not, you know, what you think isn't right. It's the worst case scenario. This is weird.
And then Jon was confined to his quarters for some reason. He like, oh, that's right. He found out about Neddard being captured, and he was like, he wanted to go, and they're like, don't do anything stupid, and he does something stupid, so they send him to his quarters, and then Ghost. Now we definitely know the direwolf's name is Ghost. Like, what is a ghost? And he goes out. Ghost finds out that you know, guys come back to life, and he's like, oh shit, oh shoot, what am I gonna do? And so then he goes and he attacks it with the sword, and he's like, well, this isn't working. And then the big guy comes in. I forget who his boss is.
No, the old bear. I forgot. I think it's J.R. Mormont.
No, J.R. Mormont comes in, and then it's like, oh, but
Jorah Mormont's father,
but he's not dead,
or uncle or great uncle.
No, yeah, his like Mormont,
but they're related.
Jorah and J.R.
Yeah.
Like that. It's like that tease. It's like, oh my god, like what is their connection? And like, I remember originally it's like, well, why is one over there and the other one's here? But Jon Snow throws a lantern, and they burn the body. Yeah, Like, he grabbed it, you could hear his skin sizzling and stuff. And I was like, oh my God. But he bashes a lantern against him, and the body burns. And then Sam is like, I read about them in the book. Or I read about it in a book in the Maester's library or whatever.
They burn the other body, too. The other body comes back to life, too.
That's right.
And wreaks havoc.
Does it? Okay, it doesn't...
Yeah.
It doesn't really say it wreaks havoc in the episode description. It's just, like... I didn't get that impression that it, like, destroyed a lot of stuff in the show.
Killing 3 people is wreaking havoc. I think that's what happens. I think he kills 3 of the Black brothers.
I don't remember that happening in the show.
3 of the Night's Watch.
I don't remember that happening in the show is what I'm saying.
It might happen next episode, maybe? They might just... It happens off page, so they might describe it on the next episode. If we don't know. It's in the future.
Right.
But Caitlin, something to watch for the actress for Caitlin. Will she have a hard time closing her scarred hand? Because the wounds are still with them. John, burned hand. It's on a sword hand. Wound is still with him. Like, it just, it's very realistic in that sense. And, when you get older, right?
Right.
You get accidents, injuries, things don't work right.
That's a good point, because I don't remember that happening with Caitlin. Like, they didn't give it much mind in the show. It'd be something you'd want to reinforce.
It'd be something to rewatch, because it might have been so subtle that
we don't realize it.
Like Tony Stark, right? Like in further movies, he always kind of holds that bum arm that he hurt at the very beginning of Iron Man, or that Tony Stark hurt at the beginning of Iron Man. I don't know. There's like all those like little things through the MCU that characters do because of their backstory and from a previous movie. And I wasn't watching very carefully, but something to watch for to see, because in future John chapters, he doesn't want the reader to forget. He squeezes his hand of his burned, he squeezed the fingers of his burned hand, which was also sword hand. So he can't hold a sword for a while because his hand got burned. So
interesting.
It's a good thing he's a steward and not a ranger right now.
That's true. So, all right. So let's go across the sea.
Yes.
So go ahead.
War happens, and the Dothraki take a village, and Dany is very nice and says, no more raping, free the slaves, even though they're like the lamb men,
right?
Or lamb people.
They sleep with goats.
And let me tell you how it plays out in the books, because I thought that the show much well played out, much better.
Okay.
In the books, Drogo's just sitting on the chair, wounded. Dany goes to see him. He's wounded off page in a battle, in the battle for the Lamb town. Miri Mazdur, who was she was getting raped. She's like, oh, I can heal, and she does use the same thing. All are a lamb of the great shepherd or whatever, and we're all part of the great flock. And if you know what happens, let's just say that this is a big character development for Dany, because yes. So that's how it plays out in the book. In the show, Drogo is wounded in a fight we get to watch on screen, where he fights a guy, but for some reason he walks right up to the Arak, which is that's the name of the curved blade. He walks right up to it and pierces his skin. For some reason, the other guy didn't keep attacking. He just kept it. It's a drama, right? It's drama. Pierce his skin and just keeps it there. And then Drogo, no weapons, he does the whole Dalton move, rips out the throat. But not only does he rip out the throat, he also rips out the tongue somehow.
Right.
And tosses it onto the thing. So that was kind of...
that was pretty graphic. I appreciated that.
That was graphic. That was very graphic.
Spoil... I don't know if it's going to play out differently in the show, but if I remember correctly... Miri Mazdur actually poisons Khal Drogo and causes him to die, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, if that happens in the show, then the show actually does, it's like George R.R. Martin deciding he can make it more impactful, because the only reason Khal Drogo has a wound is because of this battle that is being fought by the guy who felt he was entitled to this woman as part of his spoils, who did not get his woman because Daenerys said that all slaves were hers. So Daenerys inadvertently causes Khal Drogo's death, which is more tragic. So I agree with you that this is a better way for it to play out, because I did not remember that happening in the book, but I was like, man, that's really powerful stuff. It's Lawrence of Arabia. So yeah, I just thought I'd make a comment about that. But I don't have a lot more to talk about as far as Across the Sea goes.
That's it. I really enjoyed episode 8.
I really enjoyed episode 8 too.
It was just where, and I think inside the episode they talk about it too a little bit, where all these different storylines, all of the storylines finally hit their breaking point, right? Where something actually happens. No, I made it sound that way on purpose, because if you remember this, you remember that these things happen. You remember that Drogo gets injured.
Yep.
You remember that they fight a White Walker. You remember that Robb calls the banners, right? This is where things happen. And it's almost like things didn't happen in the previous episodes, when you and I were just discussing that actually
a lot was set up in
really
the previous episode.
In King's,
yep.
Yes, we're King's. So all of this stuff comes to a head here, and then for us, we get to play it out in the last 2 episodes of the season, and yeah. Anyways, that's all I've got for episode.
Yeah, the other thing is, what's interesting about this episode for me is there's a version of the show that just sticks to point of view characters, and this is an episode that acts as kind of like a blueprint for it. So the idea that you need to go outside of point of view characters to tell the story is a little bit misleading. I think them using it as the way they do, there's a way that you could have done it where you didn't have to. And again, part of it I think is D.B. Weiss and David Benioff. This is their first show, I think. And George R.R. Martin has a lot of... not only does he know these characters like the back of his hand, but he has a lot of experience writing television. He wrote a lot of television and movies, and decided to write novels because he was tired of the fact that television and movies are constrained by a budget. So, and time.
Just like this episode
Budget
was.
and time.
This episode,
Yep.
He wanted to show all the Bannermen coming from the castles that this is a big deal. These are and I felt like it's a much bigger deal than in the books. In the books, he's calling all the banners. They're coming from here. He writes them all out versus, maybe in a movie with a bigger budget, you really can see all the knights and all the foot soldiers from all the different castles coming and gathering where it really is a big deal. Yeah. And to your point, he definitely has a lot of experience writing television, because this episode moves. Clear starting point, clear ending point. That's very different for all the characters. And one could make the argument episodes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 were all let's let the viewer get used to the world and how things work, and now we're going to go ahead and really jam the story up the readers or the viewers throat.
Well, I mean, I liked... It's funny, I've enjoyed the episodes. I think episode 8 has been my favorite. I did have a pretty good appreciation for 6. But also, as far as the behind the scenes, what they decide to talk about in the behind the scenes is Arya poking a hole in someone, Sansa being manipulated, and what was...
Thank you. You reminded me of something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Very, very important.
Arya.
Why was it called the pointy end? Yeah, that's not really why it's called the pointy end. So in the book, Arya sees the stable boy, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do?" And he's going to come and attack me.
Right.
And she forgets every single lesson Syrio Forel taught her. She forgets everything. But there's only one thing she remembered. Jon Snow's first lesson with the sword, which is stick him with the pointy end. And this was somewhat foreshadowed way back in episode 2 or episode 1 when they're leaving, when John gives her a needle and says,
with the
"Stick it
pointy
with the
end."
pointy end." So I appreciated that, but it was very subtle, right? The title, and you don't quite have all that context from the books.
Yeah. I just thought it was like weird that they were like kind of obsessed on like, and she sticks him in the behind the episode. I was like, oh yeah, I thought it was like pretty crazy that like, man, she really feels bad that she killed this person, but like she had to survive. This is gonna be intense. I'm trying to think of what else they talked about. I think, they talked about I don't know. The inside the episode was just sort of whatever. I don't know. I passed. I'm interested to see what happens next. Spoilers. Soon we're not going to be referring to him as Neddard Stark. We're going to be referring to him as Deddard Stark. But you like that? Did I tell you that before?
No, but I love it. Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
Let's see. So 5, 6, 7, and 8. What do you feel? How do you feel? Good, bad?
5 and 6, nah. 7 and 8, everything picks up.
I wonder if that's because we watched 5 and 6 2 weeks ago, and 7 and 8 we watched this week, so it's like fresher.
I think that here's why. Because in 5, Ned is no longer king, or no longer Hand's king. Jaime attacks him. And then he's back to being Hand's king. It's almost like that whole thing just like kind of water under the bridge.
Yeah. I mean, it's the slow sort of beat down of Neddard, because he's like, Robert's now doubting him, and he doesn't have he's like the voice of reason, but is he actually the voice of reason? I mean, he wants to put Stannis on the throne.
Yeah.
You know Stannis. Should Stannis be king?
Hard question to answer. Wait till we meet Stannis. That's what I say. Is let's wait till we meet Stannis. I'm foreshadowing again. Our next podcast, we will have finished the season.
Yep.
And possibly one or two episodes into season 2.
Yep. Sounds about right.
And I'm very excited to see. First of all, I'm very excited to see Dragonstone.
Okay.
But I think I'm going to be disappointed. In fact, I'm 100% sure I'm going to be disappointed. Dragonstone, in my mind, is this desolate volcanic piece of rock where it's always dark and there's these bright red things that just kind of, like hot spots that are just like red, but it's all dark and orange. And that's kind of how I picture it, with these gloomy gargoyles and this giant keep, and just lonely. There's nobody there. There's nothing there. And it's not a super major location like King's Landing,
but it's important.
But I always felt that Dragonstone was very atmospheric.
Okay.
And that's why I'm going to be disappointed when I see it in the show.
Maybe.
If they even show Dragonstone. But I'm super excited to see who plays the Onion Knight. I'm very excited to see, that's Davos.
Which we're not going to see until season 2. Right? Okay.
I'm very excited to see who gets to play Stannis. And actually, I'm very excited to see who's going to play the Red Woman. That's Melisandre.
Okay.
Or even if that's how you pronounce her name. I don't know. Apparently, Irie Westeros. Jeez. Well, that's all I've got.
That's all I have as well. I am looking forward to the next 4. I will say this, like, it did hit. I think episode 4 of the first 4 episodes, episode 4 was my favorite. Of these, episode 8 is my favorite, but I was constantly starting to feel very engaged. And like, I think I'm turning on it. Like, I think all of the people who were like, see, you should have watched this years ago. Like, I will be, one, sure, you are right. Except I will still have been as critical as I am now. Also, I like the fact that as we're watching, you're giving me information from the books. And in fact, I almost want to go back and reread the books. There are certain things like we've talked about that the show is doing better. But there's also some things like you said, Samwell's not getting as much pushback. He's not using logic to defeat them. I find that really interesting. And as an adult, I think that's a really interesting idea. It's a really interesting concept. And so like if you wanted to, call this the mature show, like you should have something like that. You should have a debate in the show. That's fun. But yeah, I'm enjoying the show. I'm going to be very critical of it though, as I always am. And I'm still not quite sure that that D.B. Weiss and David Benioff always know, like, have a good interpretation of what they're doing and who their characters are. But we'll see how that develops as it goes. I mean, think about I don't know if Roz is a character in the books, but she's a character on the show.
Not yet.
She might be an original character, and if she's an original character, I mean, I don't know.
Created by.
That
line always bugs me because they created the show, but they should say the
proper credit that they should have had was developed for television by D.B. Weiss and David Benioff. But you could make an argument that it's based off of a Game of Thrones, it's inspired by it, but it's not. But it's not a Song of Ice and Fire. So they can always go. On that note, I have nothing else. I think it's time for us to conclude this verse. My name is Matthew.
I'm Lucas.
And that is the end of this verse of the ballad and song of Sir Waymar P. Royce. Have a good one, everyone.